Councilmember Lambert.
We're all here. We're all here.
Councilmember Lewis, Councilmember Weed, Vice Mayor Golia, Mayor Whitmer.
Here, okay.
Forbes.
All right, public comments for any items that are on the agenda. Seeing none, we'll close public comments. Okay, item number 1, and the only item, council goals and governance workshop discussing feedback regarding the town's goals for the coming year. Nancy.
All right. Good afternoon. All right. So we have an agenda before you. Simple agenda. I'll take you through that. But today is really to focus on two main areas. The first off is discussion on priorities for the coming cycle, so the next 2-year time frame. Before we do that, we'll kind of reflect on the last set of priorities and goals that you established. Here are some updates on that, including the discussion about what continues. There are many things that span multiple years, certainly. So we'll look at that, reflect on accomplishments, and then we will be doing our conversation around priorities, around a few kind of big topics that when I would have the opportunity to meet with you each individually, we identified what are the topics that warrant some conversation in this setting. And so I have listed those. Well, first of all, affirm that I got it right. And if I did, then we will make our way systematically through those topics. And then take kind of the combination of that conversation, what are the goals that we are identifying from those, as well as any ongoing items from the initial presentation. Those will then lay out a work plan for the next couple of years. So once we then have completed that, we'll take a little break, just a short break so that we don't extend unnecessarily. We'll see how we're doing, and we're going to switch gears a little bit. One of the goals that you established a couple of years ago was to do these regular workshops, to do them annually, which has been a practice now for many years in a row, but alternating, setting 2-year priorities and goals, and then spending time on governance topics. And so we're going to do a little bit of a merge here, and so the second half we'll just do some reflection on the council norms, operating norms that you established in 2016, and have some conversations just generally about governing together and kind of looking forward. So that's what we'll spend the latter part of the afternoon on, and then following that we'll do some wrap up, talking about next steps and evaluation. So that's our plan for the day. Questions? Okay, excellent. All right, so the agenda I have posted here, we'll come back to the topics, but before we get started, because we want to make this feel like a workshop, right? So it's not just a typical council meeting, we do a little warm up. And so we're speaking future focus. This is a goal setting workshop. I put a prompt up here, up on the board, that did a dramatic fall off of each chart before some of you arrived. So fast forwarding 5 years from today. Okay, so we're looking to the future. I'd like to kind of complete this sentence. I'm so happy to see that, right? So thinking, what do you hope to have seen completed or accomplished 5 years from today? So I'll give you a minute to come up with what you'd like to see, and then we'll start this again. 5 years. Yeah. You're going to be challenged with these flip charts, and so it's going to be dramatic when they start falling again. So just be prepared. All right.
I'd like to start.
Okay. Apologies for attention for you.
Okay. So I'd like to finish that by saying, so happy to see that 5 years from now, our new town center project is fully completed, including all the landscaping and all of the public areas, beautiful and vibrant, and that we are, that our residents are resonating with the environment and coming to enjoy the coffee cafe and the library, and it's a true community center, and it is they're there in the heart of Appleton as we've tried to envision over the last 10, 15, 20 years. And then in that 5 years, we should be able to achieve that, maybe farmers markets, and other public events being happening here.
Did you get it all done?
Anyway, just all of that.
All right, so,
That's-
and George is taking notes over here too, but,
And
since
he
I'm,
types really fast.
since I'm typing and writing, so I hope I got the gist. So 5 years from today, our new town center project is fully completed. With an exclamation mark. Residents are enjoying all the amenities and it has become the heart of Atherton. Is that a good summary? Okay. We can make notes about that being right. All right, excellent. So who would like to go next? 5 years from today.
Somebody would probably say that all the buildings that have been put in the park have been removed. One answer says we are to remove it.
Yeah,
That would be part of the first part.
We have a tendency to fully utilize temporary trailers for their full and useful and beyond useful life.
Fully depreciated.
So were you wanting to say that, or you were saying someone
I
hypothetically
mean,
would say that?
I'm sure that, but it's common sense, but I hope that it does exist because I'm sure that anybody that enjoys the park would want to see them removed.
5 years from today, all the temporary buildings have been removed.
Yeah.
Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, I won't go with that.
That's
part.
Right.
That's really part of the first one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, George.
Should have kept for park. I'm gonna try to keep trains out of the park.
You mean, if we including the iPad, iPod, pods there too, is that right?
Everything, so we can get the maximum use, extent of
All right.
I'd say, I'd be happy to see that our community has the same character and feel that it does today.
That's gonna be a tough one.
We'll say 5 years ago.
Yeah, thank you very much.
All right. 2 more.
Well, I'll add that we have continued to manage the town with fiscal conservatism and maintained an annual surplus. We've been able to do that for 5 years. That will be terrific.
And maintain a surplus, is that what you said?
After the completion of
Yeah, you could say maintain a surplus after completion of the town center.
the all the surplus is gonna.
After town center. Okay.
I would be so happy to see that I can wake up every morning.
Period.
However, I'll come up with one that's
Okay,
town
but-
related if you'd like.
I can write that one down if you want.
No, that's okay, that's not a problem. So I think I'd be so happy to see that the town has really developed a sense of community, and a sense of participation in all town events.
Town has really developed a sense of community.
You want more of a sense of community
Yeah.
than there is today.
Yes,
More, you know.
more. Well, I'm not so sure there's much
I'm just teasing.
today, but,
I
okay.
know. Well,
So you had the second part of that, sense of community and more community events, was that it?
And participation.
Participation. Great. All right.
I would, not that
Go ahead, you can add as many as you want.
I'm gonna add the fiscally responsible fire service for the town.
oh,
Yeah,
that's
yeah, that's a
near and
good one.
dear.
It's very close to my heart.
Yeah.
Fiscally, what was the word used?
Responsible
Responsible.
fire service for the town.
All right. Any others on that?
I will add also,
Okay.
which is that we have taken a hard look at construction in the town and developed policy related to it.
What kind of policy?
Well, I could go there, but I think we have, I think many residents are inundated by the construction. We don't really have policies that manage that construction in a way that enable people to do what we, one of our key qualities that I think Mike was pointing to is preserve small town character and quality of life. And I think there's two things that adversely impact that we really haven't dealt with effectively. One is construction and the other is traffic.
Okay. What else? Do you have other things you'd like
We
to add?
have a neighborhood traffic plan.
You mentioned that.
Well, yeah, I have a couple. So,
All right, this is good.
one is I'd be so happy to see that the US is still operating as a democracy. But I would probably say that I would be so happy to see that our streets are still maintained as the best in San Mateo County and elsewhere.
We gotta do some catch up now. We're don't think we're at the top anymore.
In San Mateo County and elsewhere?
Yeah.
All right. Here's our roll. What else? Do other ones go ahead?
Traffic, I don't know how to phrase it, but the right transportation, that traffic's flowing smoothly and people are able to walk their neighborhood streets.
Okay, I have one.
Going smoothly.
Why don't you just say traffic, bicyclists, and pedestrians
Yeah.
Or safe?
I have something more specific.
safely use our streets?
That's a good one.
Say it one more time, sorry, I'll make sure I have, we're working on it.
Excuse me.
Is that what yours?
No, my specific is that I would be so happy to see that the El Camino Real from, at least Redwood City through Menlo Park and along Atherton's corridor has a protected bike and pedestrian lane with an alley of trees or other kind of beautiful protections. Because people are riding their bicycle and
Okay,
walking
but that's
along El
different than the
Camino.
one Mike was identifying.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, exactly.
All right. You say safe for now, but you had flow in there.
Yeah.
He's got this there too. I know this is partly circulation, it's not just safety, what you were saying.
But it's safe circulation
Safe
for all.
circulation.
For all.
Okay. Anything else?
I would say related to the rail corridor, the extension of the quiet zone and safety for the rail corridor component through the town. Good.
Okay. That's good for kickoff? Get us going?
It's a kick.
All of our staff are able to work in buildings without rats and other infestations.
Oh. Do you want me to write it down? Noted, right? Okay.
Oh, you do have it.
All right.
This was kind of.
Well, that's good. I mean, I think that all organizes a little better once we get going, but what is happening?
Rick is being funny.
Oh, we could have copied these things from the night.
Yeah. He brought his notes from 2 years ago.
It was a different topic, just to be clear. It was your vision for the future, I think was the.
We established a 3-year plan.
All right.
All right.
Well, I still think that that activity is a good way to kind of get focused on the things that you care about and the priorities going forward. Many of these things we're going to talk about in greater detail.
But can I ask a question?
Sure.
Shouldn't we know, I mean, so there's a bunch of different issues that individuals have brought up, some of which there was back and forth, so there's clear support, but some of which there wasn't. So it's not clear that everyone supports all of these.
No, this was just a brainstorm warm-up activity. This is not, nothing conclusive is happening here. This was just to kind of hear from one another and begin the conversation.
And to add one more that it's been a big one is drainage special assessment consideration. So we have to, I mean, it's a huge problem in town, so it's something that I think that we really have to drill down on because there's a ton of money.
So let me just outline
That
what's.
makes you really happy?
Let me-
That is so happy, so happy.
Let me just kind of forecast the topics that we're envisioning taking on today, that we're going to come back and kind of do what has happened, looking backwards and accomplishments. But the topics that I heard consistently in interviews, and there may be different directions, that's fine, that's why we're talking about it today. Included, you know, obviously the Civic Center is a big one, it's moving forward. Congratulations, this is, I'm so happy to like be here to celebrate, but there's still a conversation about fundraising and all of this, and so that was a topic that I've heard consistently that we'll want to talk about, what that looks like and how to move forward. Housing and the train station plans are a little bit commingled, so we'll have a conversation about the impact of SB 50, yeah, here, and then also the train station as it relates to that and more separate as a conversation. Drainage and water treatment, as Carrie's pointed out, was also a big topic that came up. And then public safety is one that I think, you know, maintains, importance.
What does that mean?
What is the
Police.
Public safety.
Public safety, perception of crime in community.
But you're talking about policing.
Police, yeah, right. That's right, on the police side, not the fire side, it's not what I heard so much. The other topics that we brought up that I heard about, and we can add them to the list if you want, but I knew that there was like motion, so I didn't know the status was around fire, the status of those negotiations, and then also the garbage contract was the other thing that I had heard. And so if there's a need to have those conversations, we'll add them on the list, and we'll work through this as well. Yeah.
So I'm surprised that transportation's not on there.
Yeah, me too.
I feel like that's one of the very most important things we deal with.
It's
Okay.
huge. Yeah.
Transportation means traffic. Traffic.
That's a 5-year.
We're not gonna start our own bus line.
I think we should.
No, really, our little shuttle buses.
Yeah. Well, that's something has been standing on the work plan. So we're going to go through the existing work plan. And part of these things may be that you have goals and priorities you've already established that you're wanting to see continue. And that you may want to talk about it more today. You may just say we're headed in the right direction, stay on point.
On the traffic, say traffic/construction. Because there are two different things, but construction is part of the traffic problems that we hear from as well.
Okay, this is construction. I'll write up one further when we get to the topic here. I started with traffic and /circulation, and then added in parentheses, construction.
Or
Okay.
you could just put another dash that says construction. And there's certainly an overlap with traffic,
But it's
but there's also some independence.
Yeah, well, that's occurred in the. All right, well, we'll list those out when we get to that point in the agenda. All right, but I think it's helpful to just do a kind of a reset on the priorities that you established last time we went through this, which was in 2017. And here are the updates. Some things have become kind of regular ongoing. George is going to give us an update on all of these, then maybe some accomplishments. And the question will be, do these items kind of continue in the vein that they are pursuing? And of these new ones, what are we going to want to read into the work plan? So George, why don't you take us through
Sure.
this?
So you all have this handout. I've seen it before, and I think we sent it out through it as well. And a couple of years ago, you developed 6 broad categories: maintaining fiscal responsibility, preserving small town character, quality of life, creating a new town center and library, managing circulation and improving safety, strengthening community engagement, transparency, and then the kind of catch-all at the bottom was be a forward-thinking, well-managed, well-planned city or town. So those are the big broad categories. And we have a lot of little things in there that we've accomplished over the last couple of years, the most significant of which is groundbreaking on the new town center and library. That's huge. And that's pretty much where our staff have been focusing their attention on. But there are, as Nancy mentioned, there are a lot of continuing ones down below. Monitoring OPEB and PERS costs and maintaining fiscal transparency therein. That relates to the council's policy on establishing contribution levels. We set up a couple of funds. The OPEB fund's been there for a while. The CalPERS fund was recently set up by the council. We didn't put any money in it yet, but it's something we will be able to do after the Civic Center project completes. The next one was developing a savings plan for maintenance of future facilities. And as I go through these, staffs in the audience, they may come and go throughout the day based on what their schedule is. But while they're here, feel free to ask any questions and they'll feedback. A savings plan for maintenance of future facilities. We do have that fund set aside for maintenance of significant infrastructure. That $505,000 of it, that's going toward the new building. Once we open the doors in that new building, that fund is designed to be an annual set aside of funds, so we don't put ourselves in a position of having to struggle to maintain our facilities in the future or build them. Ensuring adequate revenue sources and exploring options. The council struggled with this one over the last few years. We researched business license fees, the parcel tax, assessment districts. So for assessment districts, the council's basic direction was when it makes sense, let's do those and explore those as part of an option for drainage, for streets, for lights, for whatever it is. For revenues, revisions to the business license, that one, the council opted not to move forward at the particular time, and it's out there as something we can do, or can put on the ballot to do, but it's not moving forward. And then as well, the parcel tax. That one failed during the last election cycle, so we don't have that revenue source any longer. But in the future, after the Civic Center completes, you can reassess whether we do or don't need that additional revenue source based on our revenues to expenditures moving forward. Small town character, quality of life, updating the general plan. That was currently in progress, everything except for the housing element. It's due to come to the city council in June or July. June or July, one of those two. Working with neighboring communities to address regional impacts and traffic impacts. This is a hard one. We're certainly aware of them, and we provide comments on adjacent jurisdiction developments when we receive notice of those. But whether or not those comments and mitigation measures are enforceable is a different story. Implementation of the drainage master plan. Again, this one's ongoing as part of the discussion topics for today. Park use master plan. We have a number of little projects that are going to move forward into the current coming up fiscal year, like the hammerhead at the end of the driveway. And there's a couple of bathrooms that are on the renovation list for next year as well. But the larger park projects were put on hold because we got 6 trailers now sitting in our parking lot for the next 2 years that we're going to have to work around power up. That's a bit of a challenge at present. Maintaining a proactive police department with a strong focus on traffic safety and enforcement. That's also part of the conversation. We've had a recent perceived increase in the number of burglaries that have occurred in town. So we're addressing that issue. Different word.
No, I just think perceived is an interesting word to use.
Yes.
Okay. Are you saying it's not an accurate perception?
No, it's not an accurate perception. The number of burglaries over the past few years have been higher than the number that occurred last year. So
We're seeing the same thing as in other communities along the Peninsula. There's this perception that it's like all of a sudden a lot more burglaries if you look at the data, and it's not significant.
Well, we should pull back. My understanding is that it actually isn't accurate, that there was a blip
It
last year.
depends on time period.
Exactly.
yeah. If it's the last 3 months of the year, maybe. It's the whole year.
Compared to the year before, how do we do?
Compared to the year before was an anomaly.
How about compared to the year maybe before that? How do we
Lower.
do?
Yeah. But it's
No.
a time frame issue.
18,
Compared
17,
to-
16.
16 was lower. One of them was 3 years back, it was higher.
That's true.
Yeah.
And 10 years back was quite a bit higher.
Quite a bit higher, yeah.
went
different.
down, and then it's back up, and then down, up.
I think what's different in this day and age is we're doing a lot more push notification
Yeah.
and informing the residents, you know, like real time almost, that this is happening.
Awareness is higher, yeah.
And so the awareness is higher, the information output is higher.
Well, and the law has changed statewide, so statewide crime actually is going into some places very significantly.
Yep.
But regardless, the awareness is higher, and the residents are expecting improvement
Yes.
and action, yes. And so, you know, we need to step up to that and do our best with making progress and pushing out that every time we make progress.
Right.
Just like they've been doing that, so I think that we're doing okay there, but, you know, there's,
One of the other-
we can catch some of these guys.
Yeah. One of the other things that occurred recently on May 18th was the Citizens Academy. And my dad and I happened to stop by while he was in town, and there were a good, 10, 12 people around the table here, 18 people at the beginning, who were really engaged in the conversation with the experts in the room, and they learned all about the DA and how they interact with the DA and what it takes to bring a case forward. And things like that. We got a lot of comments back afterwards in appreciation of that and understanding they're going to help push that information out to their neighbors. And we'll do that again in the coming year.
Okay, so you're gonna do it on an annual basis?
Yeah.
Yeah, it needs to be done regularly.
I think you had given us a list of who was attending.
Yes.
Could you send out a list of who actually attended?
Yes.
So we know.
Yeah, there were one or two on that list.
It'd be good to be able to interact with some of those folks, so we'll get send that deal.
Next one, creating a new town center and library, execution of the town center master plan, begin construction. That one's going. Seek additional funding, that's always been a challenge for the council and the community. So that's the discussion topic for today as part of the Civic Center project. Identifying expenditure priorities for library funds, that's also pending construction. Once we're done with the town center project in the library, we will have a surplus revenue from the library funds that we need to identify some target projects for that are beyond building components. Managing circulation and improving safety, addressing traffic safety issues, especially on ECR near schools, that's ongoing. There are a couple of big ticket projects out there on the bicycle pedestrian master plan that we've got to find funding sources for. So if we can partner with Redwood City, Menlo Park, EPA, the county, and other jurisdictions, there might be ways to collaborate on regional bicycle pedestrian plans and projects. Improving safety of Caltrain crossings. Councilmember Weiss mentioned this one. It's on the discussion topic for today about improving the safety along that corridor, also improving the quiet zone or expanding the quiet zone, and having a discussion around the future of the Appleton station. Strengthening community engagement and transparency, more community events. We have a lot more community events than we used to have. We've got a couple of movies coming up at the park and some concerts, most of which are organized by Francesca over there in the corner. She's hosting those events, but every time we
She's
put,
coordinating right now.
but every time we put on a community event, just so you know, it's kind of an all hands on deck thing. Virtually every member of our executive team has to participate in some way to make the event successful and attend and volunteer.
Can I actually ask the staff, I guess, do people say, well received? Do you feel like it's a burden that you don't like, or is it something that takes enjoy out, or somewhere in between? Anybody?
Anybody jump up? Robert?
I enjoy it. It's good for the community, strengthening the community, and also I think for staff as well. I mean, just getting out there and good for camaraderie as well. I enjoy the movies, the concerts in the park, seeing that, we're bringing that here is pretty cool. Pretty neat.
So this is only going to be our second summer doing it, so,
Yeah.
it's kind of, except for the National Night Out. We're going to have, will this be our sixth? Fifth or
National
sixth?
Night Out?
National Night Out.
Yeah.
6 or 7, yeah.
Yeah.
6 or
Plus
7.
we have the Christmas party for our,
Yeah.
so that's the third, fourth year. Ask Francesca, how do you like doing all that work?
Yeah, learning curve's over.
Yeah. No, it's really good. You get to bring a lot of people. I noticed that there's a lot of people outside of Atherton that do come out, especially to the National Night Out. A majority of them are just neighboring cities. They're just really drawn here. So if we can kind of encourage more of our community members to attend it, since it is for them, essentially. It would be good to see all that, yeah.
That's the challenge.
That is the challenge.
The next one is enhancing the town's use of transparency tools. One of our biggest ones beyond Facebook and the city's website is OpenGov for the finance part of things. We're working on expanding that. Robert and his junior Captain Teddy are working with OpenGov to expand our use of that. And part of that is to also develop some metrics. And you get a monthly report in your council packet that has a lot of statistics for the police and public works and the work. We're going to try and morph those statistics into a series of metrics that someone from the public can log in and look at in real time, as well as expanding the use of the OpenGov tool so that you can get onto the town's website. If you're interested in how much we spend on cleaning uniforms or how much we spend on irrigation in the park, you can drill down on those sorts of details specifically and pull that information out.
Does OpenGov give you reports on how much people use it?
Yes.
Because it would be probably helpful to us to have some summary from you of how much people are, using the OpenGov. I think access to the website is one thing, but actually drilling down into the data would be helpful. And maybe, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, but maybe how many people actually use the tool to drill down in a month, and if there's any topic that, a particular number of people have drilled down on what that is, or if there's more than one find. But to know which topics, I guess my assumption is that relatively few people use it to drill down, but if, 8 or 9 use it and 4 of them are on one topic, that would be very useful information.
There is a back end of the website that provides that sort of data, which we can present a report to the council on. One of the other components of it that we need to enhance is helping move people in that direction. It's got a new feature called Stories, which we can produce a story around the town center project, or around the park, or around a specific item of importance that the town wants to get out there. And it'll provide information and narrative and photos and pictures, but it'll also have an opportunity to click here, click there, and it'll drive you right to the OpenGov financial portal, and you can get to that live information. But that's part of it as well.
But for what Rick is asking, if there's an analytics section, if we can get trained on that, then that would be great, and then we can do our own reports.
Yeah, because, and the more we pay attention to something, then we end up taking action around it, or more likely we take action around it. You can see that with the whole variety of reports we get.
Right. Agreed. Hosting a town hall, state of the city. We hold regular community engagement meetings on a variety of issues throughout the year, the general plan, public safety, housing, and such. This one was originally started, I can't remember which member of the council
After me.
asked for it, but it was to try and do an annual town hall state of the city meeting. We never followed through on that particular one, but it's hard to get people to come to these things in the first place, so sometimes more hot topic issues draw people than just the normal state of the
The
city.
crime thing was incredible.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Even the follow-up had a lot.
Yeah.
Not as many as the first one, but still full.
Goal F, the forward-thinking, well-managed, well-planned city, enhancing collaborative partnerships with regional agencies. We're working this year, under the mayor's ask, to put together a joint meeting between us and Redwood City, and a joint meeting between us and Menlo Park, and also a meeting with state elected officials. A couple of meetings coming up over the next few months after the summer, most likely. So that's part of that particular goal. And we try and do that every year in some fashion.
Will there be a specific topic, or just open-ended brainstorming or something? I think if there was a
For the collaborative meetings between the two agencies, there will probably be a specific topic of interest. For the higher level elected officials at the county or state level, probably more of an open Q&A.
Yeah, I'm envisioning like a small panel discussion with mostly Q&A, because the residents want to come and ask questions, although with SB 50 being pushed out, there won't be as many questions on that, but, and Jerry Hill will be off the Senate, you know, because he's termed out, but.
Right, so he's not gonna have the, impact. I mean, it's, personal opinion is, I think if there are identified topics, one main topic or say 3 other kind of general topics that are going to be focused on, it gives people, and then, open for other general questions, but I think that you need to kind of identify 2 or 3 main topics and you advertise that, and that prepares your panelists also, and you have like a theme or something. I just really think that just kind of saying, we're having these people here, come.
No,
Come for the coffee.
we're trying to have.
Come for the coffee?
Yeah, we're trying to get a date. It's been very, very difficult to
Yeah.
get dates and then they cancel out, so.
And Jerry Hill, you're right, he's gonna be off Senate, so this is
It's okay.
The next one was adopting a practice of holding an annual council workshop. We're here today because of that one. Here again next year. Explore opportunities to develop performance metrics and reports to the community. That's what we're working on with the Open Gov Fiscal Transparency Portal. That's the last one there. But again, as I mentioned, staff's here in the room. Feel free to ask them any questions you like. Say, no, I was going to say that.
So
Go ahead, John.
George, there's a little heading here that I think goes with the one on the other.
Yeah, those are the community
Group
engagement.
Getting task force,
Yeah.
South County Major Accident Investigation.
We participate in
Comments from
all
the
of
topic or something about it.
Wow.
I'm sorry, I just have a question on this,
Yeah.
performance metrics.
Yeah.
I don't think I've heard anything about that, much about that. What is that?
So Open Gov Fiscal Transparency Portal, which is on our website,
Yeah.
has 2 sets of other features that we've been underutilizing. One of them is stories, which allows us to create public engagement narratives and photos. I used it for the value engineering that we did on the Civic Center. I put out a story on that, and it received a lot of clicks back through there. But the metrics component of it is a back-end feature at this point that allows us, once we put in all the data from the various different departments, to create basically a performance chart that says, hey, it's doing this, dashboard measures of different features.
So Carrie has a question.
Under F, and this is going to be directed to Mike and Lisa, since I see both of you in the audience, we've done considerable upgrades to the internal system for building and planning for software and so on and so forth. And I know it's been a huge, endeavor on staff's part. Where do we sit and where we are in the upgrades? And
right now in the upgrade as far as track it, I think we're a little bit behind on the most recent upgrade, which we haven't looked into yet, so we will definitely be looking into that. But I mean, what we have, I think operates really well. And Robert actually got whoever else he was working with, getting it to the public where they could go online and actually look at their permits or the status of certain permits.
Yep.
So, I mean, that's been, I think, a really good tool.
yeah, because I know that Brett was very active in it, and obviously the contractors love it. It's a huge
Yeah.
tool. Even the fire district likes it because of the ability to.
The contractors ain't taking advantage of it, it's like they should, because they can actually, on their projects, or whatever they say, PPG, anything that PPG is involved on, they can bring up every permit, status, inspection results, everything, and there's just not a lot of them. I think there's just a handful are actually taking advantage of that tool.
It's
And that was even like that from the beginning.
From our perspective on this site, it's a huge tool for transparency for construction that goes on in town. It even gives the general public the ability to look and see if people got permits to do something. So some jurisdictions are a lot more progressive in their position than we are. And I just didn't know if, when Brett left, that system kind of gets pushed away. There's a lot of money involved.
Yeah, and it's operating, and it's just, and I think that more the updated version was the heritage tree permits, and that was added to it. So Robert and they worked, and Sally, I think, worked on. But so now they can actually see status of heritage trees or tree permits issued, so.
But to your point, contractors love it.
Yeah.
Residents are kind of less aware of it.
Sure.
So the mayor and I actually met with a resident the other day. You may have seen his email, it had about 30 different suggestions to do from a resident's perspective.
Right.
And when we sat down and talked to him, one of the suggestions he had was to develop a resident-oriented version, no changes to the software or anything like that, but a resident version of how to use TrackIt, how to get information on what's going on in your neighborhood, what the rules are for construction, what to do if you hear chainsaws in your backyard at 10 a.m. on a Saturday morning. You know, that sort of focused approach.
Well, that would be, in my opinion, because we get a lot of calls related to construction-related issues. And I think that just like we've been more informative related to the police department, we need to be more progressive in trying to inform our residents of the tools that we have available to us, that they can then look into simplifying it, and we're moving that beam forward as far as staff-wise and software. So, I mean, it's gonna be a huge relief to a lot of our residents if they feel like they can touch something and get right into it. Oh, look, yeah, they do have a permit, or they're doing construction and they don't have a permit. Thank
And
you.
you're right, because a lot of the questions, majority of the questions I get by phone or email are just what you're talking about right there, where they could actually have access to it on the web, on the
It
site.
feels like we're mixing two things here that are closely related but a little different. One is what the rules are, you know. Somebody should be doing it in before 8 a.m. or whatever it is. And the other is the status of different projects.
Right.
I actually learned, I have to add extra time if I walk my dog during certain hours, because people will stop me to talk almost exclusively about construction projects. It's always like, I didn't call because I didn't want to be that neighbor, but.
Since I see you.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly
More
right.
about those rules of engagement, like when it's allowed.
Well, yeah, exactly, what to do when, you know, and usually it's somebody starting before 8 a.m. or someone's there over the weekend or something like that.
Was available.
The Lindenwood Homeowners Association is really the only group that I've seen, including us, that has put together a list of what you can do, what you can't do, and when. And they did that about a year and a half ago. I think Marion did that. But we should probably do something like that, but to put it in an email blast, one of the things we found when we met with the resident is, you know, maybe it's something that you already knew. Many people don't spend the time to look at the Athertonian, but they might look at their email blast.
Yeah.
And so I think we need to migrate more towards email blast. But you're right, we need to get those rules kind of identified, just so they can go look them up if they want to.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I do want to say, I want to thank staff for doing, I mean, I know it's a constant project, and I know you guys do a contractors forum related to informing them, so kudos to all the staff that works on that. It's a huge tool, and I'm sure it helps you in reducing the amount of time you have to answer questions
Yeah.
and answer telephones.
Other questions or comments? So there are a few things that kind of jumped out. First of all, I would just note that, first of all, thank you, George, for looking into it. It's very helpful. As a reminder of all these things that are kind of ongoing and in progress. So you see where it says discussion topics. Those are some of the things we're looking to explore a little bit further and maybe define what the priorities might look like for the coming years, or decide, make some decisions on those. The housing element, which kind of ties to the housing topic, ties back into the general plan, so I made a note there. Related to the safety and being proactive, and maybe wrote down a note around making it annual citizens encounter, sounds like the first time, so that might be something to put on here just to make as an observation that it's regular and ongoing. I mentioned about OpenGov and then TrackIt. I think also something that education around the tool, but also, you know, around, or the resident orientation around kind of the rules of engagement and FAQs, something that seems to fit in here also. So, any other notes that you have?
Yeah, I'll add a comment. On the first one, on maintain fiscal responsibility and ensure adequate revenue sources and explore options. One thing we didn't list here is an assessment of fees, which is clearly revenue. It's subject to certain rules and regulations, but I think that is something we're going to be looking at this year.
Yes.
and I think it's important that we do that.
In particular, the construction timeline.
Yep.
Right, but we've also had some discussion on the council of the road usage fee issue,
Or something.
which I know there's some history around, but I think we should look at that. And as I was driving down Atherton Avenue to get here, I don't know if you've noticed it, but in the right-hand lane as you're coming down, the amount of tire marks in that lane is just amazing. Huge. I don't understand it, but
You know, our side of the world, it's almost starting to cave in.
Maple is caving
Yes. ECR,
ECR, sorry.
See, maintain the best roads in the county, right?
There we are.
And I think I saw a sinkhole beginning at the turn off of Emily onto Park, right by that palm tree. There is
Yeah.
off of
Good thing
Emily.
Robert's
There's a lot of
here.
water there.
Getting all that, Robert?
Co-business.
Emily and what?
Park.
Okay,
Ah.
so you said that that's actually an assessment, fee
Yes.
assessment is gonna be, okay. So that's something that we should make mention of in the work plan going forward. I think it's important to mention all these things and include them because it all aligns to the goals that you laid out, but it also reflects the work that staff's doing. It's something to keep an eye on and to monitor. Because that was one of the things that I heard in the interviews was, first of all, you have this enormous project that consumes a lot of time and energy to great effect, which is the town center certainly. But the resources that town has, it's limited. There's only so many people. And so maintaining balance within those priorities is something that I heard is important. So, all right, any other comments or observations generally on the update on the prior work plan? Great, well then, what we have completed, and I will write these up over here so we can tack through them. But to really spend a little bit more focus time on these topics then, so we'll set aside the others. So we'll talk about the town center, but really the conversation, as I understand it, is really about how to approach fundraising, what that looks like, and how to continue with that. We talked about housing.
I'm sorry, do you think that's the most important thing we've done with town centers, how to approach fundraising?
No.
What did you say? I'm sorry, I
Sorry.
spaced out. What
Well,
did you say?
the construction, town center's moving forward, big project, very important. And this is in terms of the conversation for today, not in terms of weighted priority
Okay, I
overall.
gotcha.
Right, good clarifying question. All of these, I'm not placing any judgment or priority on any of them. These were just areas that I've heard in my conversations with you that we should talk about that when we're together. Okay, we'll come back after all of this on a conversation about what's most important for the next couple of years. This is just to inform that process. So yeah, no, that's not it's a much bigger project than just that. But some conversation around fundraising is what I heard I need to talk about. Housing is a big topic. And this is something that George mentioned and highlighted to me also in terms of something that's coming. And I think that in our conversations we sort of roll around it, but it's something that we want to talk about today. What should be a priority or a goal around that? Maybe it's within the housing element, the update that happens with that. The train station plans, but then we can expand that to be sort of the corridor and the safety of the corridor, reflecting the initial comments that emerged, but something around that rail line and the conversation on that. Water treatment and drainage. This is something that with all the rains this year, I know has really heightened the visibility of that need to focus on that. And so that's another topic. Public safety really meaning in the police part of public safety, as we heard, and we've started that conversation a little bit, but to think about what to focus on, what are the strategies to pursue. And then traffic and circulation, we added this one, and construction as well, as relates and or separate. So, big lift on some of these, but really the goal here is to talk about within these areas, what do you collectively want to focus on? We'll do prioritizing afterwards. We're really looking at kind of building out the work plan, knowing that some of these things just take much longer and some of them will have some short-term priority. You with me? We're good?
We're with you.
So depending on, as we mentioned before the others came, depending on where the discussions go on two of those, then there may be some need for some recruitment.
For some what?
Recusal.
Oh, right. Yeah, I will take your view on what we need to do.
Yeah, with respect to Councilmember Lemperus, it's purely the Civic Center project itself. What about the fundraising component?
I don't think that there's necessarily any interplay between where you live and if money is raised for the project. I mean, theoretically, it could extend to where what you can actually afford to add on as additives or something like that. But I think that that's really a remote issue. I don't see a problem with all the council members participating with respect to fundraising as opposed to what the project looks like and how it's ultimately done.
So the second recusal is with respect to the water capture facility proposed at Carter Field. If you get into that specific conversation, then the mayor would end up being recused. But general townwide drainage, green infrastructure plan, that's all fine.
So we have to make sure that we,
We'll go through the
as we
systematic.
go through it, we say, okay, if we're gonna talk about 4 or 5 different things, then we need to identify what we're doing and just be disciplined about not
Yeah,
sliding from one subtopic to another.
okay.
Okay. We have 2 of our attorneys here.
Well, the good news is all that's on the agenda is talking about concepts. It's not talking about any action.
Yeah.
It's action that triggers the problems with people being involved.
Just a separate point, I think the camera's still going, and I think you get
Oh,
that.
did I just block it?
It's fine by me. I just thought I'd point that out.
There we go. It's kind of awkward here. Okay. Well, so, and that is also a good reminder that this generally is a workshop conversation. This is your opportunity to explore these topics. Following the workshop, we'll be putting together a report that kind of summarizes the key takeaways and the outcomes. And the work plan and the work that comes forward then will follow in terms of budget and other priorities on the council's agenda. So this is really intentional about having conversation on these topics without action as a result. Okay, so I would suggest maybe we just go through these in order that we have them. Some of them may be quick conversations, some may take longer. I'll keep an eye on the time. If it looks like we're spending a lot of time, we can make a decision if we continue or if we want to pause and then move on to the next topic. Okay? So the first thing, first of all, in all the conversations, I mean, the town center, I think, is in everybody's mind. This is a big deal for the town, and you have been part of this, the road to get there for so many years. And so it was a lot, but that is a priority and it takes a lot of time. But wanted to have some conversation about fundraising and offsetting some of that broader cost. And so I know that is something we've talked about in prior years. That was an issue or a topic. So I will open it in terms of what that might look like and what the thoughts are on that.
Just out of curiosity, the fundraising topic itself, do we have any idea where we are related to namings or anything like that? I mean, because there's a little bit of a disconnect with the town, our side and Atherton now. Have there been any naming opportunities or anything in particular that we should be aware about if we're discussing this topic? Is it?
From my understanding, Atherton Now's fundraising efforts have not involved specific naming rights or opportunities. There's plaques and there's bricks and things like that that have been contemplated, and there's a wall, a donor wall, that's contemplated within the lobby of the city hall. But with respect to naming streets or naming buildings and rooms, none of that's been communicated to us.
So I could just add real quickly on what he was saying about the donor wall. It was envisioned by the Atherton Now group that if you see a donor wall and there's like a slab, a tile, when I say a piece of granite that is 2 feet by 3 feet for like when a large donor, $1 million donors get those, and then it goes down to smaller little sections. The analogy, the example would be if you go into the dermatology building of the Palo Medical Clinic, there's a big donor wall that is like that. But there were 4 major $1 million donors, and then a lot of other, $500,000, $250,000 donors. We didn't really get the $5 million or $10 million donors that would warranted a street activity or something like that at this point. And it's my understanding that the Atherton now is kind of ceasing to be. Is that correct?
I don't know if they're actually ceasing, but we haven't had any recent activity.
Well, but from what I've heard from Sandy is that, she's instructing her brother-in-law to, file closing documents to.
So we get our money before that happens.
So on the donor topic,
Yeah.
and I'm not I guess it's always nice to get a $10 million donation, and I think we all accept that. But I think that the fact is maybe our outreach to even the smallest of donors, whatever that might be,
Yeah.
because I think that so many members of this community have wanted to step up, but they can't be that $1 million donor, but just wanted to be part of that project. And I think at one point in time, the council did discuss maybe a pathway with, very similar to the way that Little League Baseball, honored your people for donating. Because I think that message wasn't given, and I think that there are some people out there that have hurt feelings that we didn't ask them, or they maybe have said something over a period of time. And so I think we got to come up with, because every little bit helps.
Yeah, so Carrie, to kind of follow on to what you're saying, I think the thought is that once the Civic Center was kind of completely designed, the big buildings and everything, that all of the landscaping and maybe where the hardscaping's gonna go and, all that, then you develop a brick buying program, fundraising program, or, a fountain, or plaques on benches throughout, and things like that. And so that style of fundraising is, I think, the next step, and that has to be, yes.
I just have a question, I think it's a process question, I don't know. I thought we had Atherton Now so they could actively solicit, so the town wasn't soliciting, right? If Atherton Now is no longer being active and we've got continuing fundraising to do, who's doing that?
Oh, that's part of the question.
Well, we can do it. Atherton Now was brought in because anybody that gives money directly to us, we have to disclose as a matter of the public record. Any money that goes to Atherton Now, the only thing that comes to us says Atherton Now gave us the money. So it keeps it, some people wanted to be anonymous and give significant donations, and the only way to do that is to have an intermediary.
And so unfortunately, Atherton Mills, the big donors really didn't,
So there's no problem with the town soliciting directly its residents?
And
So-
just to clarify from what you just said, so can an anonymous donor not give to the town directly?
It's very difficult because we have to accept it, and when we accept it, it becomes a public record. So, theoretically, somebody could write a check, but when we cash it, we know who the payer is, so that becomes public record.
And there is a challenge, if the city attorney can of course elaborate on, you physically soliciting
Yeah,
person A.
that's what I was worried about.
Yeah,
It's just a disclosure issue.
the FPPC has regulations, and there's a name for it, but I forget what it's called. But
Behest.
The behest rule. If you go out and say, on my behalf, would you please give a donation of X? If they do that, then you have to put it on your Form 700.
Yeah.
It's actually a different form, but it's a behest formula, a form that says they gave money on my behalf.
And there's, I'm sorry.
But just as an organization, you can certainly go out and say, everybody, step up and give money to your community. That's okay to do that.
buy a brick, buy a leaf,
Okay,
buy a
so
plaque.
I would suggest that we look at this in 3 areas. One is what has been promised, which is the donor wall. The donor wall actually is not just a concept, it actually has been promised. It hasn't been defined about some sized granite slab or something. What Atherton now has done is they've told their donors that there's gonna be a donor wall and that they would be positioned on that wall in quantities segregated from other quantities, and that actually came before the council. So I think, you know, we don't have to define what that's gonna be now, but that is one piece of the whole giving thing that's kind of done. We also decided that there were various naming opportunities, and we assigned dollar amounts to those naming opportunities. I also am not aware that any have been given, and I don't know if that's because they haven't been given or because Atherton now has failed to communicate, but I'm not aware that any have been given. But I know that, you know, we've identified what they were. I've had conversations with people about those are large naming opportunities. And I would say that we should continue that. It really, at this point, because we have the funds projected in the general fund to pay for the whole Civic Center, any money we raise that are significant donations basically offsets the general fund dollars to be able to use them for other purposes in the town.
Filling potholes.
But the thing is if Atherton now has not communicated the people that, for example, that were $1 million donor, they need to be given first choice. Do you want to have just a big, your name up there, or do you want to have a name, you know, the children's room or something like that named after?
Yeah, to my knowledge, they have certainly communicated they get their names on a donor wall.
Right.
And I don't know about the other. I haven't
Yeah.
heard that there isn't.
So we need to find that out.
And so I'd say that's the second component, or the big potential donations. And personally, I think that's a good thing for us to support because it'll offset funds to use for other purposes in the town. But I also think that Mike's comment is right. It's not gonna happen if somebody doesn't lead it.
Yep.
It's just not gonna happen on its own.
Yeah.
And the third thing is, again, has to be led, but it's some kind of opportunity for people to financially participate in this center project and receive a brick or
At all
some other
levels.
kind, at all levels, and receive some kind of recognition for it.
Is this some
Which-
kind of in-kind contribution, is that what you mean?
No,
No.
their name on
Dollar
a brick.
contributions,
Right.
but you
Just
get
make it
$1,000 and you get a brick. That's that's what,
$50
that's,
and you get.
well, you can give $1 if you want to go down there, but that's what they did at the Little League, and they have bricks for people to give $1,000.
Separate from the
Across
donor
trees
wall,
just
which is
next
larger.
door over there, you put a donation in, several of us did.
True, true.
Put a donation in of $250 and you fund it one of the trees, and then there's a plaque there.
Right, so that's just a third topic, so
Yeah.
I'm just dividing it into 3 areas.
And I will say that the one concern I have is something Councilwoman Lewis mentioned, and that's the losing our anonymity component, because so many of our people are generous but don't want to be known. They're okay with nobody knowing, they just want to donate. And I don't know where we are with Atherton now, and
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to lose that ability, because I think that that's going to be important to a few people.
Well, I think you're absolutely right, and if that desire is still there that you know of, then we need to let Atherton now know. The problem is, you know, I think they have kind of stopped really actively working on it and reaching out. The main person has moved away, and so there are this, so if the infrastructure is still intact, and I think that's what we're wanting to make sure.
Yeah.
And if that, you know, if maybe that responsibility of managing that Atherton infrastructure could be delegated to somebody who wants to continue working on it. I think maybe some of, then we need to find that out so that we could then snag some of the larger donors who may want to be anonymous.
If not, we can set up our own foundation.
We're having kind of half a conversation here, though. It's kind of problematic. We don't know the answer to some pretty basic questions about Atherton Now's plans or what they're doing. I'm actually very concerned, I think they've got some pledges, and it's not all money sitting in a bank account somewhere.
Yeah.
So someone's got to follow up on that. And so it seems to me before you address these issues, we should know what they're planning to do. And I don't know the best mechanism for that, but that'd be very helpful.
Yeah.
Well, I think what Elizabeth said is accurate. I think they're planning on closing down because nobody's doing anything.
Well, if we want to have a foundation, we can say, can you please leave it open? Or we have to have like a Civic Center foundation, similar to other foundations that we have in town, like.
Well,
the
I have
Art
to tell you, it was very
Foundation.
difficult for them to create the Atherton Now, whatever they did.
Yeah.
It was,
No
it
problem.
took a year.
Let me ask a question. If someone were to give through a donor-advised fund, so if I were to make, if I had a donor-advised fund with Silicon Valley
Community Foundation.
Community Foundation, and Silicon Valley Community Foundation were to make a grant to Atherton for the Civic Center project, purpose being Civic Center project, and I were to inform, you know, when you make a donor-advised contribution, you can make your name anonymous and you can make the fund anonymous, and if I were to ask for both to be anonymous and it came in from Silicon Valley Community Foundation, would the town, and it came directly to the town, would there be some obligation for the town to find out who that came from? And
No.
Whoever gives it to us, we have an obligation to know who gave it to us and report that to the public.
so one option would be to recommend people, if they want to make an anonymous gift, is to do it through a donor advised fund.
Correct.
But not everyone has, you know, set up through Silicon Valley Community
No,
Foundation.
but it's far easier to set up an account at the
Yes.
Silicon Valley Community
Than to
Foundation
set
or
up.
Fidelity, or there's lots of people that do donor advised funds, than it would be to go through what Atherton now went through.
Right, because that was horrendous.
The last report I had from Atherton Now, I think there was still $2.5 million in pledge versus what they had in cash.
They need to get us that. We've been
Yeah,
asking
so
for it
I
for 2
asked
years.
that at the groundbreaking, and I was told that almost 100% was in cash. Because I said, I put it in the framework of, hey, do we have some risk here? Because we'd been threatened that there were a couple large donors that might not end up, and I was told that wasn't true, but I don't, you know.
The last report we actually got, a physical report, was back in October or November of 2018.
Well, I mean, it just seems to me that these are our neighbors
Yeah.
and friends, and we're working cooperatively, and we should be able to get all this information.
Yeah.
And it's important that we do.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, well, to help us make decisions, because, I don't think we want.
I think that's the most important thing.
It's important.
So here's what to summarize what I have heard here. So first of all, there are different ways to go about donating. So we talked about the donor wall, which is already a framework that's been committed to through Atherton Now, naming opportunities as the construction moves forward and pursuing that. And then just individual recognized contributions through a program or a plaque program, these sorts of things. In terms of actions that follow, first of all, to understand clearly the status through Atherton Now, getting an update on money versus pledges, commitments that have been made, particularly as relates to whether it's naming or donor or whatever those things ought to be, and then the status, and then exploring options around a donor fund strategy for those who want to maintain their privacy and the contribution that they have. Have I missed anything on that?
Nope.
Okay. Great.
Next.
Yep. Next topic.
He quickly moves on.
Traveling us along,
All right.
But wait, I think one issue for us is if we want to see anything happen around fundraising going forward, whether it's recasting Atherton Now with other leadership or finding a different strategy to raise money, we have to decide that we want to make that happen, and how would that? And so I think that's one decision. Do we want to make that happen? Which I
I
don't.
think we do.
Well, I haven't heard that. And
I
two, how, then what are we gonna do if we wanna make
Well,
it
we
happen?
want to find out the status.
I think status is gonna give us an idea, but I think that obviously the fundraising component, we still wanna keep alive, and for the next 3 years, as long as, but we have to pick up where Atherton transitions to where we think we can help in our gap.
So the primary funding need for the town, as the Vice Mayor mentioned, will be met with the general fund over the coming project years, but we still have that $7 to $8 million certificate of participation we're gonna need for a cash flow thing. So if there were fundraising contributions, it could lower that amount of borrowing, it could go toward debt service, it could do a number of things.
It could delay the need for it, it could kind of bridge
Reduce it.
Reduce it.
Raising money to have the original view is the right thing for us to do. If we can keep it going and find out where Atherton now is, make sure the foundation doesn't get closed, they haven't filed their final tax return or whatever. Because they can't, because we don't have all the money.
Right.
And then make a decision if Sandy isn't going to continue, then we choose to take it, how do we want to do it with that?
Right.
And then we can be more creative in what we want to come up with. I mean, we've talked about coming up with a lot of stuff, but we've never really said, okay, let's publicize it.
Yeah.
Let's see what we
I mean, could it be just as simple as putting it in the next Athertonian, leave your mark on history, or, kind of a catchy thing, buy a brick in the Newtown Center, donations of,
I don't think you can do that unless you have a strategy. I mean, where are you gonna put the money, and who's gonna provide the brick? I mean, that all has to be
yes,
worked out.
exactly.
I think as we move forward in this strategy, we have to figure out where, and Mike has said it kind of 3 times, that we have to figure out where they are. And then
Yeah.
strategy-wise, we know we still want to continue it, but we need to make decisions. The sooner we make them, the better, because, realistically, a year and a half out, that decision, so the more that we start now, the better off we are
I
for the
always
year
thought
and a half
that the
decision.
architect was going to kind of help us create like a patio environment, or, if we're going to be putting benches or seating around where we could, put plaques on.
They will, and they will provide that donor strategy.
Yeah.
That's, at our cost, it wasn't something we opted for.
Right.
But I think the bigger question that I'm still not hearing enough order on. Yeah, we're gonna find out what's going on with Atherton now, but I don't think the current leadership of Atherton now is sufficient to keep moving that ball forward.
I don't want to assume that.
I don't either,
Yeah,
because you
it's
just don't
okay.
know,
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that.
Hear from them.
We need to hear it first.
I agree with you on that,
Before we say,
absolutely.
we've replaced you or something.
No,
No,
and
there
I don't
can
think that
certainly
we
be a-
can.
Well, they may not wanna be replaced, they may wanna
That's
just
right.
close it down, we have to hear what they want.
Yeah. need to
We have
hear
to
it.
talk base with Sandy. Obviously, Dee Dee's not in the picture anymore.
So, we staff, myself, Robert, we've reached out to Atherton now. We're not getting the same sort of response.
Are we gonna try to assign that duty? Maybe the mayor should do that.
That's what I would suggest, is that a member of the council make that reach out
Rather
to
than
Atherton
staff.
now, rather than staff. We're not gonna get the same answer you would
You
get.
wanna draw
I think
straws?
the mayor should do it.
Okay, I'll do that.
You'll do it. Thank you, Mayor. That's a good decision.
No
All
problem.
in favor?
Aye.
I'm taking action. Workshop.
All in favor of some?
Lawyers are gone. Lawyers are gone.
Hey, the lawyers are gone.
I'd like to volunteer for doing that, everybody's okay.
See how
Okay,
that
what are you
works
gonna
out.
say? What are you gonna say?
I'll work it out with George tomorrow, or Thursday when I'm meeting and we get together.
Great.
Well, so
Thank
what
you.
I added in terms of our notes here is that kind of following that, the understanding the update is following that to determine additional fundraising goal target strategy. And so that becomes the action items. And so
Thank you for
informed by
volunteering.
the Atherton now update. What's that?
I was just thanking you for volunteering.
If you want help, I'm sure Carrie will help.
Got to mention.
I don't need
All right.
fire district.
All right, are we ready to move on to the next topic?
Yep.
All right, do we want to take, so the next one I have listed here is housing, which is a big one. Should we jump into that one now?
Oh, yeah.
We were taking a recess.
We need more housing. Need bigger housing.
Really?
What's the problem?
But
All
before
right,
we,
give us,
before we
give us a
jump,
little bit of a
before we
context.
jump into that, Lisa, when's the next housing element process start?
2023, well, start, it's due 2023, so
So-
we won't get our arena numbers for a couple more years.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
2023, you said.
That's
And-
the official housing.
Wow,
number.
we get a
SB
status on it.
50,
Right.
SB 50 will come back next year, but in a different format. It will not be SB 50 anymore, it'll be something else.
Who knows, yeah.
And then there's the Senator Beals, SB 4?
There's other stuff going
There's all
through.
kinds of
4+.
stuff.
There's a lot of stuff going through.
Yeah.
Do you want to set the table for?
So SB, as the Councilmember Lewis committed, SB 50 is on hold for a year. It could come back, or it could come back in another form via some other sort of legislation. There's probably close to 50 plus out there that could impact us in some way. In the short term, we have housing challenges in town. We are currently meeting our housing obligation under the last cleanup process.
Right.
So we're not out of compliance. We have a compliant housing element. And we're doing that mostly with second units and college.
Showing this private school sites. yeah.
Private school sites, right. So that's all fine, but there's still a lot of pressure around transit corridors. And some of the early thought was if we could control our own destiny with respect to housing, that's probably better for the community. But how we do that, when we do that, what the process to do that is a conversation.
I mean, rezoning certain parts of town
Identifying areas of
to
town.
build high-density, multi-unit housing.
Right.
Or higher density than you have today, medium density, I mean, there's a whole
Wait,
range of
the first-
options.
Yeah, I'm gonna go, yeah, go ahead. I think I agree with you.
The first question I have is whether you believe that we'll be able to satisfy the 2023, first question, the 2023 housing element is about making or identifying an area where development could occur, right? You don't have to have built. You have to have identified an area that, where you would authorize through your zoning ordinance, housing to occur. Is that correct?
Correct, and I have a but.
Okay,
Done
say the
with
but.
your statement. What was not built in the last housing element cycle will be carried forward.
Right.
So our number's gonna get larger. So we've done very well on the second dwelling units, and I think that's a very successful program, and we can probably continue to show that excellent production. However, the school sites, if they don't build on them, we'll still have to show those and then meet whatever that new number is somewhere else.
Well, okay, so here's a question. Could we zone the school to enable more housing than has been enabled and get a benefit from that?
Yes,
So,
Including public schools.
yes.
so I believe that we can meet our housing obligations through both the Menlo College site and the secondary housing. And we may need to adjust zoning for the Menlo School site to enable slightly denser housing there than we have right now. I don't think that would be a problem. I mean, I haven't talked to anybody to know, but I don't think that would be a problem. I think the idea of authorizing through zoning, multi-unit zoning in our neighborhoods is a non-starter.
I think there's also to add to the public schools,
How
public
can you build housing in public school?
Well, you can authorize
You
it.
can
in
authorize
zoning.
them, and they have talked about
Yes.
potentially wanting to build for,
Teachers?
teachers
Yes.
coming in, some housing similar to what they're doing up in Foster City. So I think that if we would
And that's
push them in that direction, there would be some interest on their part.
And the public schools that we would be talking about would be in Atherton High School.
And Laurel
And-
and Encinal,
There's no room.
there is some at Encinal.
Well, you
They
wouldn't
just built
want
this.
to necessarily limit it to public schools. If
No,
you're gonna-
we-
if you're
but
gonna
schools,
go there, you
all
should-
all
schools,
sites.
yeah, all school sites.
And then it would be up to schools to determine
the one observation, we're pointing at what we know exists in current law, but we also know they're changing current law, so it's almost hard to aim at targets, we don't know what targets.
It's a moving target.
I also want to make sure that we as a community remember, as a council and staff, remember that I at least feel like there's a very strong message from my residents that they like the community the way it is.
Yep.
And I don't want to feel like we should be either anxious to change our character in this way or feel responsible for a lot of the decisions that I believe others are making that are trying to force externalities on us. Like, for example, I look at Redwood City and Menlo Park and Palo Alto and I say, wow, you're authorizing these millions of square feet of office space with not sufficient residential space to house the people who are going to work there. Don't come looking to us to do that. That's not right. We're not getting the benefits from any of that work you're doing. All that money's going to you, not coming to us. That's all going elsewhere. And we've consciously chosen to keep this community the way it is. And so I just think we keep our eye on that and let's not get too far ahead of ourselves in terms of being willing to change our character.
That's come
I don't
up,
think anything we're excited
that's come up with all the meetings that I've been to with Senator Hill as well as with Mark. That the fact that they're authorizing these growth in these large corporations or businesses without them taking some responsibility for housing the people that are going to be associated with that growth. And specifically gets pointed out is Facebook.
In the last iteration of the housing element, Lisa, was there any conversation from the public, after to public, about the need for affordable housing, senior housing?
There was quite a bit of interest in senior housing.
Arthur.
Yes.
Jack?
Yeah, there was quite a bit, and we haven't really done much about that. There was talk in the housing element also about doing some senior workshops and having more information available. So that's an area where I think you see some seniors that want to move down and don't have a place in this community to do that. And I mean, if you kind of think about it, you could build some senior housing that looks a whole lot like one single-family Atherton home. You could certainly design a two-story Atherton home to fit a dozen seniors.
There's that giant home on the corner of Alameda and Atherton Avenue going up on the northwest side.
Lisa, don't we present some challenges if we open zoning regulations to, let's say, a higher density or a senior development or a commercial development that we don't traditionally have?
Have to do spot
With all the
zoning.
zoning that we, with,
Yeah, I mean, we can look at it in a very focused area. There could be
It's
a
also-
location that's
Again,
appropriate.
pull back. I'm very sympathetic to seniors who want to stay in the community. But if they're downsizing from an Atherton home they've owned for a long time, they have options. You know, I mean, this is not an impoverished senior community we're talking about. So if they bought a house in 1975 and they're selling it now, they've probably done fairly well.
They just expressed interest in remaining in this
Yeah,
community.
understood.
I mean, I know Jerry Carlson moved to San Carlos. I see him all the time now.
Right. Portola Valley, Menlo Park, yeah.
Yeah.
Lakeland in the park?
He only moved because he owned the property.
Yeah.
He owned that property. It wasn't that,
was his-
he said, I can't afford to live here.
But we still require that.
No, it was
Yeah.
his wife's mother's house.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, right, so.
Maybe you guys were on the record.
But wait, but-
It's family finance.
But I think Mike's comment is exactly right. Whether somebody has the economic ability to do something, moving to one of the retirement homes around here now, once they sell their house, they have the ability. That's clear. And, you know, then and of course there's interest that people have to stay in the community. It's a wonderful community. But there's not, we don't have the facility to enable them. And if the question is, well, should we build that in the park, which is the only place we have any land, I would say absolutely not. If it's, should we consider some kind of zoning change in some area of the town to enable that, I mean, I think maybe we should. I do agree that there would be interest from people, but I don't know that, there would also clearly be opposition from those that didn't want to move into it.
So can I add one thing? So if you have lived in your home, I know one particular resident lived in a home many years, would like to move into a senior center in the town and let his children occupy the existing family home because they are, you know, priced out. And so if they can kind of do that, so you haven't sold that asset to have money to go move into the V or anyplace else. But if you had a little senior center here in Atherton, so that you be close to your family and everybody else.
They
I
should
don't
build
know,
a
it's-
secondary dwelling unit in their backyard and let their kids pay for it and live in that. That's what they.
There you go. And not rezone the town. Right.
Mhm.
Yes. Rezoning the town is a Pandora's box.
It is.
So part of it could be we sit and wait and see what, and watch what the legislation is going to bring over the next year or so. And as we begin our housing element process, recognize that we need to do that a little earlier versus later to start those community engagement meetings related to that legislation and those changes.
I think, for me, anyway, a separate issue is what we're doing in terms of the legislation and trying to influence that legislation. Because, you know, you got Scott Wiener out here talking about how much we need to do, but San Francisco, where I, grew up, is, most of the buildings are 3 or 4 stories, right? I mean, clearly, and if they want to build that up, they can build that up. And they have not made that choice. Instead, they come up with stuff that would expect, cause us to change our community.
Well, that's what the mayor and Lewis said to Senator Hill at that meeting, and many of the other communities there as well, is we've already done our share here in San Mateo County and the communities. What's going on elsewhere? Don't be pointing the finger at us.
My point is, I think we should talk about whether we want to engage, legislatively. Because if we wait until we find out what comes out, that's not good. And if you wait until a week before, when they're really, the bill's really moving, you can't really influence it.
Do you think we should hire a lobbyist?
I don't know. I think we should have that conversation about what coalition, I don't think Atherton can afford to hire a lobbyist to go after for years. But there may be coalitions that we could join, or some group that would help us, that has similar, interests, that might be able to move and influence legislation in a way that we can't by ourselves.
So, Menlo Park, Palo Alto would probably be interested.
I think, though, Atherton should be very careful in how we actively engage legislation,
Why do you say that?
given the community that we live in.
I just said we shouldn't do it ourselves.
I understand.
So where are you going?
Well, let me say that CK has appointed a subcommittee to work on this, especially kind of in light of the CASA compact, as well as the SB 50. And so, as San Mateo County, as part of San Mateo County, rest assured, San Mateo County is actively working to oppose the SB 50 as it's written, and other bills that would adversely harm San Mateo County, which Atherton would be a part of. So,
Supervisors
Is that
that are
true?
actively
Yes.
asking us to.
Yeah, I was gonna say, the county's split. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't even count the county speaking with one voice, the county speaking with several voices.
Yes, exactly. The county is interested, of course, our representative on the supervisors is very interested in progressing SB 50.
Well, he backed off of that, but I don't know
He
where he
did
ended up.
because the other, 3 other supervisors said you're gonna go down in flames because it's
well,
not happening.
yeah.
But there were 2 of them, I forget who the other one was, but 2 of them were, so
Well,
it's saying that
David
the county
Canepa-
is actively doing it.
David
doesn't-
Canepa has changed he's on the CK board, I heard him speak about it. I think that it's, when I say not the county supervisors, it's the cities of the county as a coalition.
Well, it's obviously something we should keep an eye on.
Yeah, I would say at a minimum, it sounds like to stay informed of the
Excellent.
moving winds on the topic, right? To be engaged in part of the conversation where appropriate through various regional organizations and other jurisdictions. But what I'm hearing is that, first of all, there's a lot of unknowns. So to stay apprised of what changes are emerging and where that conversation is going, so as to not be making decisions late in the game, right? To be informed by that, which I think is what in part prompted the desire for conversation today, is to say, there's a pause here, but there's still a big movement out there to look at some of these things. So.
Well, the key thing is that some of the legislation, the SB 50, in one of its forms, I believe it's still there, does give time for the community to engage the rest of the community, to engage as a community to make some decisions, and they gave a hiatus, I think it was 5 years, that you got that much time to decide. And so I think that, we need to not sit back and just say, okay, we're going to wait, and then maybe we'll start the clock ticking, but we should have some further discussion. I think, Mike brought up a good point. If we're comfortable with what CCAG is doing, then fine.
And I'm sure there's communities in Southern California that are similar to us, and are affected somehow. And we gotta figure out how to build those kind of bridges so that we're speaking with one voice with them.
So, I look at it, SB 50 and its progeny or siblings, as there being 3 different elements. There's the issue of local control, which is zoning control that League of Cities is very focused on, and I suspect that's what CCAG is also focused on. And I think that we probably have similar interests with all those folks on the issue of local control. There's the issue of character change to the community, where if we were forced to take multi-unit buildings, that would change the character of at least the town around where those buildings are. We don't have anything like that here. That's very different from other members at CCAG. And I say, well, yeah, maybe we could find alliance with Palo Alto and Menlo Park, but they're building so much housing right now. I mean, there is some similarity to some of their neighborhoods, but it's overwhelming to us because it would be anything change would be a total change. And I don't know who we have the same interests with. I mean, I go to, well, maybe San Carlos and Belmont, look at the housing they're building.
Portola Valley,
So,
Woodside.
yeah, people that aren't on the train corridor.
Right.
Woodside,
Those-
Portola Valley, but on the train corridor, I don't know, maybe
But-
Hillsboro's pretty close.
The one aspect of SB 50 that I think would have totally, it's just not along the transit corridor. It was anywhere, anywhere within the town.
Because they call it job-rich areas.
Yeah.
Yeah, the undefined job
A four-story multi-unit
Well, then they
space.
change that to 1 story above what you're authorized.
But still,
Anyway, so there's a
It's
character change, and my
multi-tenant.
third area is parking. Is, most of these other communities, I mean, there's the theory that if you live near a transit center, then you don't need a car. Absolutely untrue in Atherton, because there's no place to walk to buy food or to go to a restaurant. So everybody's gonna have a car, it just is gonna put the cars on the street, and it's gonna guarantee that none of the people who live in that building own an EV, because they're only gonna buy an EV if they can charge it at home.
Right.
And that's PCE's analysis. So I think and I've taken on SB 50 on that latter issue because of my relationship to PCE. But I think for us as a community, the character change is really the heart of the thing.
I heard from a lot of council members not interested right now to change zoning, but we already allow teacher housing at the school sites. And I'm wondering if that's something, there is some funding availability for studies and to look at changing the regulations. Is that something you would like to study now or wait to get closer to the housing process. Because I have met with Menlo School, they're interested in building teacher housing, they're worried about kind of setbacks and the feasibility where it fit in. And I know the school district, Civic and the high school district is interested in
But they did have housing at one time. They did have that little village.
Did, in our housing element, the last one, did we have anything about this in that?
about teacher housing, yes.
I can't find it.
Sorry, we're all paying attention.
Well, I was looking for it earlier and I still can't
Well,
find it.
I want to say, I don't really fully understand the question again. It's-
Well, there's some grant funding available
To
that,
do what, though?
well, we could study the zoning and we could like clear the CEQA for that teacher housing. Right now, we have pretty limiting setbacks and it doesn't allow much available land remaining for it. So you might want to look at the feasibility of
Well,
putting the
is there
housing on
value
the
to
site.
us to do it now versus wait so we can include it in the,
The next housing cycle, just that there's the funding available now with SB2. I don't know how long that'll be.
If we could get the grant funding to do it now for all the schools, so that it's there, then I think that would be, we could then limit, you know, the height of the buildings that they're talking about. I think that would, there's grant funding available, I think it's well worth the time.
Studies take time, it doesn't mean you need to pull the trigger on it.
and we could pulling the trigger and get the benefit of the housing element later.
Yeah, we would still add it to the
Yeah,
next.
I think that's good.
It requires council resolution, so this is not a final decision. I'll come back to you.
We probably
I-
have
Used to be a
agendas.
boarding school too, didn't it?
Sacred Heart was, yes.
Yeah, all the girls, it was all
Yeah.
girls.
Okay.
It was, it used to be.
Yeah, initially.
Well, I kind of shuddered, and maybe I should recuse myself, because I live right across the street from Sacred Heart School, and down the street from Menlo School and Menlo College, and, you know,
Yeah, but the teachers live on property, they won't be driving anymore.
oh, yeah, right, except,
All right, moving on.
Okay, I just want to make sure I got that note down. All right, so I decided conduct feasibility study for revised zoning on school sites using grant money.
Okay, we can't see what the next topic is.
Oh. Next topic is train station. You want to take a quick stretch break?
Yes, let's go right around the back.
Yeah, let's do that. Here, let's just,
Yeah.
One time
let's
around the
come back
back.
at 2 o'clock. Here's this about 2 minutes. Is that okay?
How about that?
Hey, can you make it around that?
We really get down the steps? What are you talking about?
Well, this is, we change the zoning to allow more housing on the site. Or if we do, like a project-wide sequence of all the sites, not just one site.
Okay.
Because they want to see if you're moving for
No,
the long
and-
term, not the one.
No, and I understand that, and that's
Yeah.
what the thought process is.
See, Nancy.
Just doing things that have the process,
Good.
showing good practices like that.
Chief, how you doing?
Always.
Set it up, set it.
It's up to.
Yeah, I'm like, okay.
Yeah, and if I could show you the zone for this much.
I just,
That's
from home.
And if you have public safety and traffic. Yeah, well, unfortunately,
They're all you.
they're all me, yeah. And Robert, or is it before?
You got a coffee?
No, it's fruit.
it's all right, nice.
How are you?
Just got a voicemail from somebody off of Valley. You know, the bypass exit that goes under the freeway? The secondary emergency route off of Walsh, right?
The pitbull walkout.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's locked.
that's what I got a call from, so resident is trying to figure out.
I don't know, I've never
I haven't been up there.
I've been up to the escape route, I've heard of
That's
that.
the one. I mean, the escape route goes out.
We have two, so there's the drive out one when you go up Walsh Road, or,
And so when you drive out, does it go under the freeway, or is it just?
no,
the
that one goes out
Okay,
the back.
so then it's the pet one.
Okay, I'll find out. Somebody, I should know. I know the other one.
All right.
Okay.
Hey, chief,
Yes, sir.
the address? I'm looking for an address.
Stockbridge.
27?
Oh,
Mine, that's
yeah,
right.
we're gonna work on, we haven't got there yet, but we'll, outreach, as a result of that, to say everybody else.
So one of the problems is, sorry.
How's married life going?
Oh, it's okay.
It's okay?
Okay, that's not a good
That's good.
answer.
Oh,
You just
my
started.
husband and I have been together for like 8 years, so.
Oh, so it's no big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're almost over on your
We
10th
lived
anniversary.
here- Yeah, we lived together for like,
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah.
Should I have to go?
I don't know if he's in the office yet today, but I don't have all the details. Other than it was long story short, it was a family gathering related to a wedding. And apparently the parents lost sight of the little girl, and when they went searching the property to find her, she was located at the pool. And some residents, or people at the party, were able to pull her out of the pool. Our officers arrived, administered CPR, and then medics transported her to the officer. No, so this is where it gets really, really sensitive.
Oh, yeah.
She's still on life support, but they're waiting to harvest the organs for transplant, so she's not gonna survive. So that's why we haven't really put anything out proactively, because as you can imagine, it's extremely emotionally sensitive right now. And so we just haven't gotten to that point where we help them pushing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it would be pretty inflammatory, but, you know, later down the road, we want to take probably advantage of the safety education component with the schools. I don't know, I wasn't at the property, so I don't know if it meets, if it's in violation of the regulation or not, but that's the piece that we're just,
And this was on Sunday.
I believe it was Saturday.
Okay, so,
Yeah, and then, you know, if I forget, don't feel, reach out.
should I put Joe?
Either one, Joe has more information about it, but this is something that, because of the sensitivity, we don't typically put out a proactive press release.
Right.
Yeah, kind of like with suicides and stuff as well. Unless there's no crime involved, that we're aware of at this time.
Right.
Yeah, all that kind of stuff. Just extremely suicide.
Student housing, I don't
Yeah.
think
Sure.
that I met
All right.
in the school. The high school.
Yeah,
Yeah, and then I know, this,
Good friends.
they have the retired nuns on site. Yeah, but I don't believe they have other student or teacher housing on site. And then the public schools are also kind of interested, they're just not sure, you know, how do they do it, where do they get the funding? Whereas Menlo School could probably, getting up in the donors, you know, with the public schools, yeah, they're just not sure how to go about it, right? Yeah, I know that they're interested, they're just not sure how to do it. So they had some meetings kind of countywide to kind of come together, schools and some city staff to have conversations. So that works good. But yeah, we can open up the Zoom a little bit. They were kind of looking at that front parking area, and they were doing structural parking, underground parking, and putting the housing there. But we don't have really large setbacks, so that kind of limited the property. And so I might, you know, look at changing some setbacks or allowing more units on site. That would be good analysis too. I don't know how many teachers they have. I think they just said they had kind of recruiting and retaining. Yeah, exactly.
At Menlo College, they have problems getting professors because they can't afford to move here.
They don't have any on-site teacher.
Yes, they do.
They do?
But they live in the dorms.
Oh, they live in the
They
dorm.
live in the dorms, and they live in El Camino Hall, where they also have, you know, that auditorium and stuff like
Yeah.
that.
Okay.
Yeah. But they used to have that village. Menlo School had that village, and I think the college had some people living there too, but that was just, you know, small two-bedroom houses.
Yeah, yeah.
No yard, they were all built right next door to one, and there's a little like dirt street that went down the middle, because I used to drop kids off there all the time for soccer practice.
Oh, okay.
And they called it the village, and then when
Yeah.
they expanded, they took all that away, and they lost a bunch of teachers that moved out.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
So, Lisa, since you know a lot of people up the peninsula, how does it make sense to have high-density housing along the rail corridor and say that people are going to be jumping on public transportation and the capacity of the rail corridor can't handle the existing protection?
Can't help it. It's very heavy.
Not that I have my 2 bits to that, since Bill never looked left.
Give me a break, I did.
How does that make sense?
Well, they need to up the capacity of the rail corridor.
But they just passed legislation that said that it's only going to be a 2-track system. So having, it
They're
doesn't,
supposed to run more trains faster.
so if we're going to have a housing element like
The electrification though, right? They're supposed to be able to get.
Yeah, I said no, and then no one will be able to go east or west because we'll all be waiting for the gate
because
to
you've
come
got
up and
43
shoot
grade
across.
separations that the
And then you'll be behind a school bus that will say, wait a second, I need to now pull up and look. Even though the train just went by, and by the time they get across.
So for Atherton at capacity, right, the gate downtime is going to be 35 minutes. How are we going to be able to travel? How does it make sense? And then you supersize it. Supersize it with an SB50.
Right.
It's not going to happen. Electrification's not going to happen.
Yeah, and they also pass a new regulations on how we evaluate traffic under CEQA. Because vehicle miles traveled is not level of service. And if the project is near transit, it's essentially.
This is what we send you the email.
Right. And there's nothing we can do about that.
How does that make sense?
Timing is horrible.
Well, the night.
Oh, my God.
All right.
Oh, good.
No problem.
You said something.
All right, we're missing.
For next week?
Yeah.
Oh, that's right there.
You had a chance to take a look at it.
Yes, I did.
Other than it's too long.
It is, what happened? I'll take a look at it. I saw something.
I was looking at Jimmy, said, yeah, we need to make this letter sensitive and cautious.
All right.
Public safety category, there's been a lot of interest in other jurisdictions.
I'm gonna say, yeah, it's in their email today.
I had to take mine out of the garbage can.
No, they should, sort of, stuff we do, canopy fire and all that stuff.
All right.
Did you get the academic comment?
All right, let's go ahead and start taking down the topic.
They could ask someone.
Cal, anybody hear from Cal?
Where's it?
Who now? The Bears?
Bears?
Go Bears.
Bears
Go
are
Bears.
gonna lose to the Horned Frogs in Arkansas Regional.
Of what?
Baseball. Because I'm wearing this for town people.
Wouldn't you know?
Good you clarified.
Town terminated, canceled their baseball team.
When Bill's wearing purple, you gotta figure out what game's playing.
And then later today, when I'm in Stanford, I'll be meeting with people from Cal. That's why I'm wearing my baseball shirt.
All right, we are switching topics to the next one. And for all these, it's really, to talk about strategy, options, kind of where you are, because, some of these are big topics and there are no easy solutions, and so this is just a platform for that conversation. So the next one deals with the train station, but also the safety, the rail corridor and the safety there, and we've talked about this last couple of years in terms of the not interchanges, what do we call them? Crossings.
Floodgates.
Floodgates, right. So kind of all of those within there, but particularly with the changes happening at the town center and what that means for the train station and then the housing demand. It's very complex.
Well, we have two council members that are on a subcommittee on this that have already had some discussions, so why don't we start with Carrie and Rick? So they can bring everybody up to date on everything and where they think things are going, and then we can add value maybe to that.
Did you just tee that up?
You just
Boy.
You think we could add value?
Oh, no value. Go ahead, Rick.
I agree.
Thank you.
Well, we had a meeting with two individuals from Caltrain last week, and they're gonna get back to us. We basically told them that, we considered the train station an asset, that the rail committee had supported the town policy to keep it open. And they asked, what concerns there were in the community, mostly related to SB 50 stuff. They face a very significant potential expense to upgrade the train station, to change it from being a holdout station, which I think is a $20 to $30 million expense. And they're looking to try to avoid that, and they're going to talk and come back to us. So I believe that it's going to the top levels at Caltrain, and they're just trying to explore their options. They're trying to save time anywhere that they can on the train because of what Carrie talked about how the level of demand. And I think we're not the only station that they're looking at. They're looking at our station. And we had a long conversation with them if, in fact, they decided to close the train, what kinds of the train station, what kinds of things they would need to make that acceptable to the community. And without giving them any assurance that it would be, we talked about the idea of controlling that land, fencing off the train tracks to make it fully safe, putting quiet gates into Watkins to improve the safety there and enable the expansion of the quiet zone, and creating a pathway to Encinal or down to Stone Pine that people could walk along the train tracks to get to a different station. And if you look, at Watkins and the train is where the water pipe goes under. In fact, it comes out at the train tracks. And if you look south along the train tracks where that water pipe comes out, you'll see that there's about a 10-foot corridor that's SFPUC easement property. So they're looking into that, and we don't have anything to provide specifically because they haven't made any specific suggestions.
Yeah, I think the only thing I could add to that is that I think Rick and I both expressed to their leadership that we have an interest in working together for the benefit of the system at large as well. So, we're a community that believes in public transportation because we've had a station. We unfortunately don't have the ridership that a lot of other communities do have. And so, you know, I expressed, myself and Rick both expressed the interest that to benefit the system, these are some of the things that we're looking at, because other jurisdictions have expressed interest in getting more stops. And, you know, that based on their 2040 numbers, we're still going to be having the lowest ridership based on their estimates, so.
But they said $30 million is what it was gonna cost.
They didn't have a hard estimate, but they said it in the range, yeah, more than $20 million.
Yeah, because the upgrades to the station for one train to stop, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, no matter what the day is, the upgrades have to be done to the
Well,
station.
they can give us $10 million for naming the street after them.
Railroad line.
Way to bring it all together.
Did we get any kind of timeline or sense of when they're gonna come to us?
I think pretty quickly, in the next couple months.
Yeah.
I think this is, they want to move forward on that. And they know we're just launching the construction project, and there's gonna be some impact on them, you know, not much, but there's gonna be some, they weren't really aware that they only owned one parking space.
Yeah.
So they really didn't understand that they don't own much property.
And is there a handicap?
No, it's one parking space deep.
One row,
Just one
row,
space.
one row.
They own one row of parking that goes all the way to the bike storage containers.
About 43
You mean,
spaces.
One
I
row.
was gonna
One row, about
challenge you on
43
that.
spaces.
They
Yeah,
own more
one-
than one parking space.
One parking space deep.
It would have to be
That
ADA.
makes a
Just one.
difference.
Yeah, I think that we also emphasize the importance for us for safety, because of the Civic Center coming into play, and that trying to create a safety net between the town Civic Center and the rail corridor, as well as our intersection. So that's something we're prepared to, you know, but clear with.
All right. Good update. So it sounds like holding pattern, awaiting Caltrain's next move, is that?
Yeah, I think that's
It's a
right.
good answer.
Can I just say that this is like one of the, this is a very good example if we created a subcommittee and you guys got on it quick and we're actually having, like, you know, actions taking place and it's working the way it's supposed to, so congratulations.
Thank you.
All right. Anything else to add, or we move on?
We're good.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Rail Committee, for your update.
Subcommittee.
Subcommittee, sorry.
We have a rail committee.
10 times as big.
Committee and
Sorry.
it's kind of a dictatorial committee to carry.
All right, so the next topic, so we have that there. So water treatment and drainage is our next topic. Is there context or updates that we're
There
going
are, I guess, two major components to this. One is the water capture facility at Carter Field. I think the council has an update on that particular project that's moving along. You don't have to go into too much detail with that one. It's got a progress timeline. The issue there is the funding component of it and sizeability and such. The other major issue with respect to drainage is the town's green infrastructure plan being around it, with and without the water capture facility, and the drainage in general throughout town, the African Channel District, the funding component for that, and the funding component for the rest of the town's drainage, El Camino, Stockbridge, Tuscaloosa, where we put out signs once in advance of the storms, just in case of flood.
Well, Caltrans was doing some work in front of Isabella and Tuscaloosa, but it was flooding, you know, and then they had the roads blocked off, but I don't think that they were doing anything on that.
No.
They were doing something else, where they steal things.
And Robert is here as well, he can add some context to any current drainage issues around town.
Having solved what you call Lake Lloyd, is that what you call it? Or?
Lake
Yes.
Lloyd-
Yeah.
Lake Wilbur.
Oh, there you go.
Wilbur, in Lloyden Park.
Yes.
So why can't we ask that some drainage improvements be put in as we're doing the joint construction, for example, on El Camino for the West Bay? Yeah, I sent George this note. I heard on the radio, one of the fire ravaged communities was rebuilding, and they were rebuilding both their gas lines and their electric lines, and they said, well, while we have the trench open, we're just gonna work together, and we're gonna put all the infrastructure in together at the same time, and we're gonna improve the whole community. And, you know, anybody who's driven down towards City Hall on El Camino going to the north has just seen the fiasco that's been West Bay construction, which, you know, we have no, but we wanted some improvements at that same time, similar to when we did some work for them while we were doing the Marsh Road. You know, why couldn't we, why can't we still potentially improve some of these locations that might be problematic?
Well, I'm going to say that there's a couple of components. One
Yeah.
is the water has to have someplace to go, a drainage system to connect to. And up on the northern end of town, the historic connection was blocked off. And so we would have to find some routing for that water. The reference to, was it Paradise Rebuild?
Yeah.
Joint utility trenches are usually for, I'll call them more dry utilities, electric, telecom, and sometimes gas, and they don't have like streetlights and other things in there. And they can usually fit with relatively limited separation of facilities, and so within a 3 or 4 foot wide trench, you can fit all of these items. Between water, sewer, and storm, there's larger required separations, usually at least about 4 or 5 feet apart. And the case between sewer and water, it's usually about 10 feet to prevent cross-contamination. That if we had a overall design of what we were going to do in a certain location, we would certainly try and partner with other agencies in terms of what can be done cohesively. I'll go back to Councilmember Lewis's comment earlier about complete streets improvements on El Camino. That would be a rather large project that drainage improvements would be very consistent with doing the improvements.
Well, but we know everything's going on our streets. Like, for example, on Edge, they're putting, I assume it's, I asked the guy, what are you doing? And he says, I don't know. The guy that was withholding the sign that says slow and stop.
Well,
He says, I think it's water, but I don't know. So I said,
That would be an obvious one.
And we
They were paying $85 an hour for it.
And so when people want to do work on our streets, they obtain a encroachment permit. Sometimes for larger projects, it's a long lead. Other times, it's a short lead. We've already designed this, we want to come in and put it in. And so we have been trying to increase our communication with the other utility companies so that we can, number one, plan our street work so that we're not, like, say, like Edge, where we just paved it and now they're coming in to cut it.
Yeah.
We're trying to do better coordination with the utility companies so that we're working more cooperatively together than at
But we had a master plan that says when they're opening this up, and we have a plan that perhaps we would like to underground as many utilities as possible, that we would say, okay, if you guys want to do that, but we want to combine the work, you know, because they are doing their stuff on a piecemeal basis, but we have the master vision of what we're trying to get to, and they don't have that. So I just think when I see like big parts of the streets all torn up, I would just think, hey, this might be an opportunity. You know, just like a year or two ago, they did Atherton Ave with the new water line. So they are replacing all the water lines. West Bay is going to replace, I believe, most, if not all, of the sewer lines.
And we were just reached out by Cal Water for the Lloyd Park neighborhood. They're going to be replacing a few mains there. But they sent us plans like a couple of weeks ago, and they're planning to do work starting in the next month and a half, so.
You don't get a lot of lead time, do you?
Not much.
Really? Gotta be ready to go.
So,
Robert, I've heard a lot more about this, but could you tell me what really is going on with what you call the northern edge of town, the water?
A blockage?
Yes.
So I haven't seen it myself, again, it's just more second or third hand, that there was a drainage connection to, I think it was Redwood Creek through the county. And some time ago, probably due to the amount of water that was coming through, they basically walled off that connection. And so now what we have is, we have a limited drainage system in that area to begin with, and most of it is surface flow. And so it's now either traveling or ponding for the most part.
And have we, listen, you probably would know better than anybody, what efforts have we made in the past to try to get that reopened?
We contacted their prior city manager, we contacted.
You just said county, though.
This is the county.
It's actually Redwood
Redwood
City.
City of Redwood City.
Oh, it's Redwood City?
Yes.
And they've all said, we'll look into it, we'll look into it, we'll look into it.
Not a priority.
Not a problem.
There's a lot of history there.
Understood, but I kind of thought we had pushed it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, you're probably right. I do believe, years ago, there was kind of a council uprising about it. But, you know, well, there was this, you know, a resident who still lives on Stockbridge who floods all the time, and very vocal, with friends of previous, right. Okay, so I think that there was a significant effort to push it. Our existing public works director at the time said he tried to do that, but that's all I remember. But this was probably about in 2008, 2009.
And it also came up, since I've been here, it came up at our joint meeting with Redwood City
Okay.
that we held in the main house. And in that conversation, one of them said we'd look into it, the other said, you were flooding our community. We're not gonna look it over again.
That would be.
But there have to be other options between blocking it completely and flooding their community, but.
I agree.
And so I just planted, I think that's it I'll just speak for me, I think for me, that's a missed opportunity for us, because that's the same damn problem. Every, time it rains, we all know it's coming, it's always there.
So
But
we
is
can,
the
we
bayfront
can try, we
against
can certainly try again, and I think that with our current cooperative project down at Bayfront.
Mhm, right.
Better opportunity.
There's more opportunity for working together, and even if it's not a full connection, maybe, a smaller one that at least lets things drain faster might be might be something that they might.
Some sort of weird device or something.
Yeah.
That would.
That was one of the issues with the city of Redwood City, and I think since we've joined this Bayfront project, the connectivity and the amount of water flow and everything else, that's an open opportunity to have this conversation related to filming and breaking the wall.
Well, do we know that on the other side of the wall, if it's operable? I mean,
I don't know
do they
much
just
about the
kind of
drainage
plug the
system,
whole
we can reach out and find out.
No.
And what happens to our water?
It
It
works.
just goes to the wall and
It ponds.
stops?
It ponds, yeah.
Underground?
Yep.
And then backs
Yes.
up?
Yeah.
I remember this conversation well.
Or it's going into our subterranean aquifer under El Camino and it's creating
Sinkholes.
sinkholes. And we're gonna swallow up giant
Actually, it's funny,
ravines.
I'm pretty sure it's a Caltrain thing causing the problem.
It's gonna swallow up the bike.
It's gonna swallow my bike lane. Oh my God.
Oh dear.
Well, that's one way to get it built.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, one way to get it built is if they want any cooperation on the Bayfront,
Right.
Yeah.
Make it a condition.
So,
So
and
that's-
I probably would like to sense the rest of the council, for me personally, I think we should be making a little more priority.
I agree with you. I think that's a good call.
That was the issue
Put these
around
signs up.
City.
You know, sometimes after you keep hitting your
probably
head
one up
against
there
that little
now.
brick wall, you kind of
Also,
don't want to
select-
try that anymore.
Should have made it a condition the first time.
We should.
Okay. Anything else?
So we get another dollar.
So So using the Bayfront Canal as an opportunity to reopen discussion around the Redwood Creek blockage, right? Did I get that right?
Well,
Well, I don't know.
It's actually a channel, it's not a creek.
Sorry, channel.
Could we,
It rains.
It's
Could
a
we
drain
write
pipe
a
over.
It's
letter?
not accurate, it gets down.
Just
Just say ECR drainage, so we know what it means.
Well, we
Can we-
can go ahead of the,
can the council write a letter to the supervisors and to the county manager and to the Redwood City mayor and Redwood City
it
Public
may
Works?
get to that, but let Robert maybe find out some current
Yeah.
Okay,
assessment
Robert,
first.
Came on.
yeah,
I mean,
I
he's
have
got
it
that.
on my list along with the Emily
thank you.
sinkhole. Caltrans has actually responded today on the one on ECR at
Maple.
Maple.
That's a pretty
Well,
good
they got a two full, the turn lane and the.
We had
the
to
left
come,
lane
we came
closed.
in on the weekend, MC responded to PD to cone it off.
Uh-huh.
I met with
Well, that was
Caltrans
just
out
the
there
turn
this
lane
morning.
on the weekend,
Yeah.
now it's the turn lane and the travel lane.
Yeah, it moved about 18 inches into the travel lane.
That'll do it.
So it's a pretty big,
And they have to dig it out?
By the
They
way,
will.
you're not the only ones complaining.
All right, so we have a game plan for this issue. Are there any other areas you want to explore, talk about? It sounds like there's most, we have a plan already for the water capture facility.
Do you want an update on the Bayfront Canal
Yes.
project?
Yeah.
Sure.
sure. Design is about 95% done. They are starting their community outreach efforts with folks in the lower part of the drainage area. So meeting with residents and businesses that are affected by flooding down at that end to kind of give them an update on the things that are planned. They've been updating their estimates on what it's going to cost. There's a meeting between the city managers to start dialoguing about where money might be coming from to do construction. And let's see here, they're still working with Cargill on getting their permission and adjusting easements. And they've started permitting conversations with the regulatory agencies. So as of last week, they've reached out to most, but they hadn't contacted BCDC yet. And Cargill a while back put a stop on the permitting front because they were working on their issues with regards to what was considered jurisdictional waters. And now that that's been cleared, they're fully in the loop on our permitting efforts, and so they're.
They think they're done with that.
So,
I think they've got it.
How are you feeling about it?
what's that?
How are you feeling about this?
The project in
The
general?
whole project, yeah. Feeling.
I think it's a good project. I wish it would do more than it's doing, but it's certainly a good start on the drainage improvements in the area. What's being constructed is an overflow relief, so basically when the tide gates are closed at flood slough, it gives it a bypass option. The effects upstream on the Atherton channel are a little limited. I mean, if we were able to build another tide gate, that would be great. But that's not part of this project. But anything that we can do as holistically to alleviate people from getting flooded out is certainly.
And why limited on the Atherton channel?
Just because of the I'm going to say that there's two components that drain there. You have the Bayfront Canal that comes in and the Atherton channel, and basically the improvements are at the junction.
It's a railroad train.
When I say limited, it's that the Bayfront Canal is relatively flat at the bottom end. And so as you go upstream on the Atherton channel, you're going higher and higher. And so the water that's coming down is still in essence coming
So,
down that way.
we have the water capture project completed, would that make any impact? Or
It will
positive?
slow some of the water, but it's gonna still be, I think the analysis showed, in the lower realm of the storm. So I think somewhere up to maybe 5 to 7 years. But when you get into the higher level storms, it doesn't.
Is that because it's not big enough at the part-time field?
In general, it's not big enough. I mean, we had to reduce the size down to, 6 acre feet. But the volume of water from the watershed is rather substantial in that upper level storm.
What's the proposed cost of
The last construction cost number I saw was upwards of 6 million, but then you have all of the other costs on top of it. So I haven't seen a full calculation on costs in a while.
But if the town chose to contribute.
Mark capped at like 1.5 million, I think.
1.4.
Is that because we're getting credit for the Carter Field?
The MOU that you have has a hard cap in contributions.
Because at one time we were trying to get credit for the Carter Field
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah, we,
Yeah.
it was a negotiation.
And then the other part is that the county staff that's working on the project have been actively seeking grants to help offset the cost. So they're working hard to try and do that.
I would think we
I
would
think
get
there
some.
will be, I think there will be grants.
We should be getting money
Yeah.
based on this seafront wall project that we approved to move forward. Larry Patterson, he said he would be getting us grants for things like this.
Yeah, so I said they're working on it. They have applications in for FEMA, so there's to get heard.
Okay.
Let's make sure he's true to his word.
Hold on, speak to the fire, huh?
Exactly.
Under this topic, do we want any consideration for discussing the special assessment?
Yes, certainly council can do that. Our staff's philosophy at this point is when we do sort of proposed drainage projects, that we will evaluate the viability of an assessment district, to help pay for those projects.
Okay, so you don't want it on the board, or do you want it on the board?
No, if you want to have a conversation.
I think it'd be something that we should have a conversation about.
This is
Maybe
they
local,
have their
or
channel.
just
Related to
local
drainage in
districts.
general?
Like local, yeah, local assessment districts for local drainage issues.
Depends on how local we make it.
Well, and yeah,
Local for Parker Ave.
for who?
We're going to do
Oh, I
that
mean-
project at Parker Ave.
That was a currently programmed project, but we can, an assessment district takes.
Yeah.
No, I understand that. I understand.
It's related.
I was trying to bring home what the discussion was.
But, you know.
That could be under the
that-
5-year discussion.
That issue is being exacerbated by what's above them too. So, I mean, how
Yeah.
far up would you assess?
Actually, it's not Parker Ave, it's the other side. It's the
Right,
other
the
side.
boundaries, the
Euclid.
boundaries of
Euclid.
district we're talking about.
Euclid,
would
it's
be
Euclid.
included in that, right. Well, that would need to be part of
License on the other one.
the definition of that.
Send Carrie there.
Okay, so I just put it
Town
out,
shirt out.
contemplate assessment districts for affected areas, which would have to be defined. Okay,
Good.
good. Anything
Well,
else on
put an asterisk by affected though. Because this
Meaning
was
that
brought
it's-
up a number of times with all the construction
Okay.
that we've done and everybody has to retain. They spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on retention of their water so that no water runs off their road. I
Right.
think you're having a hard time telling people that they're affected because they're filling the channel with water, because they're not. Right.
They're not so.
And so that is the big issue, and if you look at it, you know, when they built that design, you know, they looked at a topographical map and said, okay, and those topographical maps have contours of either 10 or 50 feet. And so they said, oh, well, you know, this 50 feet section goes in here, but if you go actually look at some of the properties and you look at those areas, the streets are higher than the property. They couldn't even flood any water onto the street. So, you know, I think that affected is the operative word, and affected today versus where it was, you know, 25 years ago, are two different things.
So perhaps, Robert, can you provide a little context of how our current ordinance for on-site detention works with a channel or drainage area?
Yeah, so our current requirements require for new development that property owners or developers detain flows for increased impervious impervious area. So if there is a large impervious area now, and they are either A, keeping the same footprint or having a lower footprint, and they don't have to detain anything, but it's just the increment of the impervious area that they would be required to detain. The secondary part is that the detention is usually for a lower level storm, not for a 25-year storm, which is usually where, we're having, the upper level storms are the things that are really causing the flooding problems.
So the detention systems on private property are of little value, some value?
Oh, I'm going to say this, detention is of value, and I think it's a good thing that the town has it in its ordinances and in its practices to require it. There are a couple of differentiating things between what we have and where things are going. And for example, when you look at commercial development outside of town, the stormwater detention and treatment requirements are not just for what's increased, but for what's improved. And so it covers more of the site. And so we'll have some more conversations as we talk about green infrastructure and what we can, where we would be seeking your input on potential changes to help us move along on the green infrastructure plan.
As I understand, Bill, correct me, this is not the point you're making, but what I'm hearing is as a homeowner, I might have just spent a ton of money trying to mitigate this problem. So if you come back to me with an assessment district, I'm going to be, very,
But, however, what I hear Robert and George saying is that even though you've had to put in this detention trench, it's not, it wasn't sized to take all of the water away, right?
Yeah. It's just the increment.
The increment.
How long has our requirement for retention basins been in? Because, I mean, it's actually interesting.
It's been quite a while. I think it's been at least, 10 or 15 years.
If you
My
think about
house
it,
is 12 years old and we had to do it.
yeah, if you think about it, if you've got roughly 50 new homes a year, all requiring retention basins, all living on an acre, how many lots are left? I mean, we're doing quite a bit of impact.
But that has nothing to do with what's upstream of us, right?
Right, I mean,
Totally
what's,
irrelevant.
Unless they're doing it, we don't detain runoff
river
on
goes through
our
it, like
streets
the movie.
either.
Pardon?
We don't have detention systems for our street. We have storm drains
Right.
in certain areas. We have some dry wells.
You have storm drains up like on Fletcher
Yes,
and, right?
yes,
And you have
there is.
Lord-
In Atherton Avenue.
Fletcher.
And
Fletcher.
Water feeds into.
Lindenwood has got storm drains that feed into the marsh road.
But there are no storm drains along Alejandro.
No.
There is a
There's-
river that runs through.
There are many
Same place
places,
for my street.
there are many places
It's
that do
4
not have.
feet wide and 2
Yeah.
feet deep.
Maybe we
the
should
other-
create an assessment district on Alejandro.
But I'm gonna go up to Clay. You're trading under my
That's a pretty
property.
good, you know what? And when they drew that line, I
Yeah.
bet you it was one piece of property that owned all of Clay. So actually,
It's true.
and Atherton Ave actually was shown to be in the thing. So I think actually Clay is, now that's been redeveloped, I think that was actually frontage onto Atherton Ave. So I think Clay is actually.
I heard there's one house on Clay that wasn't.
Yeah, there is one at the end of the walk.
I know.
I'm trying to help you out, Rick, I'm trying to help you out.
That's what the Chinese
Okay, I think we're done with topic.
between her and.
Next topic.
I think we need that.
Before we completely spiral.
Okay.
You know, we're not used to sitting
Water comes from
so
Marsh
long.
Road.
You wanna take a stand
Right
up?
around my house, coming from the water district.
It's dumping it out.
All right, we have
Yeah, it's from Cal
we have
Water.
2 or 3, depending on how you categorize these topics left. Do you want to do a quick stand-up, sit down first, or do you want to keep going on? We've got the chief here now.
Oh, we've got a
This is
detention.
public safety.
Yeah,
Let's do it now.
let's do that.
Let's
Okay.
go stand up.
Quick stand-up, apparently,
Yeah.
since the chief stood up. That's our sign.
Yeah.
Don't leave.
No, great.
Come on up, David.
That's good.
Good. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Wanna take a break?
Yeah, Bill. Hey, once the mayor leaves, we all leave.
Yeah, all right, okay.
It's a sign.
All right, so back at quarter till? Okay.
We had somebody to talk to us.
Okay, you're paying for all this, so you gotta stay.
Yeah, that's true.
Was that your?
Yeah, I just gave it the, it's not, I asked about a specific number, I said, no, it's not. Which is.
Requires their resolution, so they're gonna say yes or no. It's not, isn't it non-competitive? That your time is.
But I would generously submit an offer of that project. Somehow that.
I don't know what project do they have?
You're okay.
They have everything, so I want to know.
Yeah, she knows something.
Some of them, I think it's for the second dwelling units, which makes sense. Things like study analysis for equal housing. The other one doesn't really.
Actually, it's
express
interesting.
the design guidelines for housing because the state is saying you have to have it objective, not subject. The other two.
A whole bunch of folks have their little guidebooks for HDUs.
Yeah, they prepared the first round of them, they were talking about the things and then decided, I don't know how well qualified, because it doesn't really use ordinance or streamline the process. Only met with
No, I mean, it was things that would, we got already, things that would just be to help people.
So, I got an email back from Karen Bacon.
Environmental.
Sally told her she can't remove the tree, she needs a permit to remove. She doesn't want to remove the tree. She wants to prune.
I can't get that kind of advice.
Well, we're changing the heritage tree ordinance to say you can't prune more than 25%. So you just kill the tree. If the tree needs to have 20, no, there's not a permit to remove more than 25%. There's a permit to kill the tree.
Right, but if you want to, you can request it, and you can evaluate it. That's part of it.
That's not what Sally told her. Sally told her she needs a permit, she needs to file a permit to remove the tree.
In the current ordinance, 25% is considered removal.
So then we need to take a closer
Yeah,
look
now I'm
at
gonna
that.
get
I mean,
back
we
to
can
her on that
certainly,
issue,
as
but-
part of the effort, clarify that, you know, you need a permit to prune 25% or more orchards.
Right.
Appropriate.
Is that would be the new ordinance, or is that?
Well, I can double check on the current one, but if it is.
It's in, that's the new one for sure. That's what's proposed. May not be in the permit.
Definition of 25% or
But I would think if she filed a permit to prune more than 25%,
Then we would have looked at it.
that would be looked at.
Yeah. That then solidifies the staff relationship with a lot of
And it shows that they're earnestly trying to use it. I mean, we get all kinds of just general calls.
Oh, yeah, she gets, when I talked to Sally this morning, Rick, she gets about 5+ calls a week from residents who want her to just come out and spend an hour plus of time to do this. So she is just, that's, in terms of priority.
An hour plus of time is an exaggeration, but I'm sure she got a lot of calls for people who wanted to come out and look at their issue.
And so in terms of priorities, she's got active permits that people have submitted,
Yeah, I
plan
told
check
you,
review, they're not there.
we've got more construction now. I mean, not than we have had in the last 5 years, it's been pretty consistent, but if you go back 15 years, we didn't have this level. I mean, it went much more up and down.
So Robert and I were
Very
chatting,
consistent.
Robert and I were chatting this morning about when we reviewed the heritage tree law, like 5 years back in the council. That's a policy decision we need to make. If we want someone like Sally or someone thereafter to actually go out free of charge and visit with homeowners and work on their arborist issues and things like that, that's a policy call. But then we're gonna need another body to do other stuff.
That makes sense.
So
That makes sense.
All right, good for you. Good job. All right, good. Thank you for being here. We got a lot of value.
Here we go.
Here we go. One more time. Here we go.
7:45.
The exciting public safety.
I saw the
part.
list that you guys made up and I go, well, we got to deal with that.
You didn't like our list?
Are you feeling pressured?
Oh, you could leave if we would flip-flop public safety.
It's okay, but then you have the chief, so I'm all good.
Well, he just lives over there.
Do you need to
He
take
was
out?
late because he had a traffic problem getting over
I
here.
serve at your pleasure, Mayor.
All right, so the next topic that I think I heard from everybody when we met back, a month ago or so, whenever long that goes, was public safety still remaining a priority. Concerns about burglaries and other issues of crime in the neighborhoods. And, you know, we can hear an update, I think, from the chief on that. And then we talked a little bit about this at the outset of our time together. We were talking about in 5 years, I think, is how it came up.
Yeah.
So we can continue that conversation from here. But I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you want to do any kind of,
Did you want an update on the burglaries, or just real briefly? I mean, from where we were in January to, you know, the first community meeting that most of you are at was a bit contentious as expected, and then the second one, again, well attended, much more positive, a lot more information getting put out. And, you know, I'd like it to be down to 0, but I would say that we're back to our normal activity of about a couple a month to 3 a month, and it was just one of those spikes that, again, not only Atherton, and not making excuses, but the entire peninsula is getting hit with spikes. And we have followed different leads, having some go down to Los Angeles. Unfortunately, they weren't able to assist us with the leads, but the information we provided them was able to help carry on their case that's related to ours. So there was some sort of outside work there, but that's about it with the resolution.
So Chief, have more people put in requests for alarm monitoring since we've had those meetings? And has your email list grown since, I guess, at least the second meeting?
It has grown some, and I get to the exact metrics as to actually putting more permits. It's hard to tell what's new and what's existing, because if you remember with our ordinance, those that were currently in our system are grandfathered. Those, whether they're monitored by us or monitored by a third party, still are required to have a permit. And so part of our process is when an officer goes out and per the ordinance steps on property, it's now a false alarm. Dispatch checks, and if they're not in their system, they're generated working with finance and invoice for a permit. And so our hope is from that is to gather more contact information. So the more that we can get in and we get the false alarms, our protocol is to make a phone call right away to the responsibles, and typically we can cancel most of those, thereby saving time. Unfortunately, my efforts from last year with a lot of education and letters going out, I thought would reduce and mitigate some of the alarms. We were about 1,000 more in addition. But I will say, we are gathering people's attention. I had a couple come in that were concerned they were already had 2 strikes and they're going to be fined, and they're working on their alarms. And so there is good conversation going out about being more aware of your alarm and usage. So I think we continue this, it'll be longer term, that we can get it down.
So Elizabeth,
I just, is it the burglaries that we're having now, the 2 or 3 a month? Is that the same MO, the second story window being?
That hasn't really been consistent. It's kind of varied.
if I could just follow up on that. The fact that there was more and then they fell off and now there's inconsistent MO, does that imply that the initial group is?
It could imply several things. It could imply that certain groups got arrested and they're in jail. It could be that they felt there was too much attention in the community, the area, and they move on. It's not uncommon. But in checking with my fellow chiefs around too, it seems those numbers of that second story, which other communities were seeing just like ours, so it wasn't the same group, but groups has dropped off as well.
I was in Los Altos Hills doing a council session, and it was the same conversation in the upper story and the same kind of,
Interesting, yeah. Well, how about the smash and grabs? I mean, I know there were some here at the park, like, park car, smash and grab and run away, and a lot of car kind of.
And we get our same share of those. I don't know if there's been a rash of them, but again, we take the opportunity. It was mentioned at the community meetings. You should have seen nothing inside your car. You put it in the trunk and do that. But we do get a lot of out-of-town people here in the park, and we have had, I don't know if recently, but we have had some auto burglaries here and throughout town. I mean, the one story that I share to get people's attention is one gentleman's car was stolen, to his surprise, but as for his convenience, he left his wallet and his keys in the car, so we always knew where to get him. And that's how his car got stolen and his credit cards got stolen.
Oh my
So we're just trying to remind people, it's like, I know that it's a safe community and we don't want people to live in fear, but just use common sense and please help us out.
Yeah.
And it's usually well received.
Even at Stanford Shopping Center, I mean, just don't ever leave your bag in the back seat, right?
just generally anywhere.
Chief, could you describe a little bit about the police academy we just had?
Yes, our first Citizens Academy was on May 18th on St. Helens Day. It was here in the main house. We had 20, what are you laughing about, George?
Mount St. Helens Day.
Yeah, well, it's May 18th. We had 20 students, 18 showed up. It was a full day. What our intent was is to allow them an experience to walk in the shoes of an officer and also expose to other portions of the criminal justice system. We had a DA representative, crisis intervention. They got to see a canine demonstration, a taser demonstration, less lethal demonstration. They were put in the shoes of using force options here with some training devices that we have, and crisis intervention. And the feedback I got was phenomenal. Every evaluation form that I received were 5s. Jennifer Frew, my assistant, did just an outstanding job putting this together. There was a graduation with shirts and certificates and emails. I mean, it was great. So success there, and we plan to add this to our cadre from the outreach events and host it around this time of year annually from now on.
And that's intended to repeat next year?
Yes.
So I got a couple of things as we look forward, public safety wise. 2, last year we kind of were working on the CSO for schools.
The SRO.
SRO, excuse me. And we started almost the school year was in, and we kind of after the fact, are we going to be ahead of the curve this time and start working on that component? And are we tracking the benefits of having the SRO?
We do track, and there is a monthly report that goes to Mr. Roddick. We track it by school incidents. And the other issue, you're talking about the financial arrangement with
the financial arrangement with the schools.
So I was almost 100% successful in getting all the school districts on board, except Redwood City is still the outlier. I haven't touched base with George for a while, but they were the outlier and with Sylvia Lane School, and they're going through closures. Unfortunately, the principal-related message to the superintendent, they didn't understand the need of the SRO. We've had some difficulties developing a relationship there, and I met with him personally, and I was kind of taken aback by his misunderstanding of what we were there for. Not punitive, but they're educational. So I'm giving up on Redwood City, but all the others are in place to repeat.
Selby is $5,000 contribution?
I believe it was, and that school is going to dramatically change next year from the current K through 5th or 6th. The middle school portion is going away.
Right.
So,
But they're shifting.
Bringing another school.
Right. They're adding a layer at the end.
But as I've told you before, our school resource officer, the current one we have, Casey McDonald, is outstanding. He spends most of his time at MA, as you can imagine, with 2,700 students there. An incident last week was a gun was found. Kids brought a gun to campus, attempted to hide it, and through his work and working with the school, able to identify them. But that just shows you the magnitude of things that are going on in that school, and a smattering of gang-related stuff, suicide and anxiety. I mean, it's amazing off the charts that's occurring at the schools. So he's spread thin, but that's his priority. And we also are leveraging our other officers to fill up the gaps in our grade schools, at the privates as well, to make sure that they're getting their money's worth that they're not contributing for.
So the target,
Yeah.
was half the cost of
Half the cost, yeah.
And that's those are multi-year agreements
Yes.
with the schools.
So then my second tier, I apologize, my second tier is, with all the growth, transportation, and all these changes that are gonna enhance our needs for traffic officers, and I know we've had some officers that have been taken from other departments, how is our traffic grant program, and are we maintaining our level of motor officers, which are very effective during the day?
We will right now that we are down one who went to Menlo Park, and then TJ Boyle, our reserve long-term, decided to, I don't know if he's permanently decided to stop, but just to stop working so that leaves another gap. We've identified an officer to fill the void. He'll be in training this summer, and we'll go probably on the bike depending on our staffing in the fall. And as you're probably aware, one of our residents generously donated 2 motorcycles to replace our current motorcycles. And so we'll be back 2-2. Not unknown at this time whether our reserve officer Boyle will come back or if we pursue another reserve officer. If I can get an officer like Officer Boyle who's retired and we can utilize him, partially, part full-time, we'll do that.
Do we have a vision for recruiting? Because I know that you've just mentioned, I guess, 4 spots. I'm feeling 4 spots.
We've been actively recruiting, and we've been fairly fortunate. Our last newest officer goes on his own next week. Our newest officer we just hired, that's a lateral, I swear him in tomorrow. Officially, he's been there for a week. Then we have 2 other officers in the background that will have to go to the academy, unfortunately. And so for now, that fills our holes, but it'll be a distance until we actually fill the holes, and probably, unfortunately, by the time we get there, something else will occur with retirement or something.
So you say academy, are we sponsoring 2 people on it?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Just,
The value by sending them to the academy, my hope is that we gain some loyalty from these kids by we're providing them the job. They don't come in with any, I'm not saying baggage, but any other past experience with another agency or anything else. We can bring them up in the Atherton way and hopefully get some retention that way.
mold them.
So I was gonna say, if you were to pick 2 things that you worry about, what would they be?
I worry about staffing and retention. And secondly, I worry about, I guess related to that is I worry about a thing that this is something I'll actually more on, but how quiet and safe Atherton is, the environment for a young police officer. It's not great for working on perishable skills and getting hands-on. Our response to that, and we are still working on it, there's been some staffing issue at East Palo Alto. The chief and I have come into agreement that when their street crimes team is back available, that we're allowed to send officers over for a couple weeks at a time and be on call so they can get the opportunity to look at serious crime investigations and get hands-on. Of course, don't go work for East Palo Alto, but stay in Atherton. So we are working on those types of issues to make sure we maintain readiness, officer perishable skills. I hope that makes sense when I say, I mean, the great thing for Atherton is, from a police training standpoint, it's challenging, but we recognize that, and then we're putting issues in place to correct it.
Elizabeth, I have a question. It seems like we're having significant turnover, and a lot of our new officers coming in are brand new recruits without experience, and so I have an uneasy feeling that they're cutting their teeth on Atherton without experience, and I would prefer to have officers with more experience under their belt so that they, when they're faced with a difficult situation, they know what to do without having to kind of learn on the job. Even though the training is one thing, there's nothing that replaces experience. So what do you have to say about that?
Well, there's positives to that, and I have to, I would say, I understand your concern. Going through the rigorous academy, going through the rigorous field training program that we have, and working with experienced officers, and they're equipped to handle those issues. The problem with lateral officers, unless you can find the person leaving for the right reason, is often they've left that agency for not a very good reason, or there's a cloud, and you have to kind of work through that to see what potential that there is. And then also too, we have to kind of work what's before us to fill our holes. Are we seeing any good laterals that we can hire? Or do we have some good qualified new kids that I can offer a career to and put them through the academy? So it's kind of a balance.
So Chief, you mentioned this, sending some of our officers over to East Palo Alto for some additional exposure. Is that going to take officers off of our streets? Is there going to be a trade over that they'll have officers over here, or how would that work?
They won't have officers over here, but we'll work through scheduling to see, so we can fill those holes and mitigate overtime. Another opportunity besides East Palo Alto, and we have officers on it right now, is the Summer Gang Task Force, which is another opportunity for them to go work throughout the county and work through very experienced gang detectives and officers for a couple of weeks. We assign some sergeants to that. There's also a auto theft task force and drug task force as well. So, like again, we look for those opportunities to send our people to.
That gets them that experience that you're talking about.
Some exposure.
But we don't lose any of what we feel is appropriate for our.
No.
So, so Chief, I think that nationwide, the issue of active shooter component is still something that is in everybody's hearts, and I know we've clearly done a good job at trying or doing the training. But this year, do we have a schedule, and is it growing, more involvement, multiple agencies? Because I'd hate to see that go away.
Right. No, we're still working. We've been working with Menlo Fire to do another joint effort. It's supposed to be on them for this summer. I'm meeting with the fire chief tomorrow for lunch to discuss that and a couple other issues. So we do want to keep the momentum going.
His turn to laugh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it is.
He's got the expense account, we don't have the expense account.
I'm just,
Is it?
I'm good.
Anybody else? Questions?
What about license plate readers?
So I've been working with George, and he's asked me to come back before you in the fall to discuss options for license plate readers and a public safety surveillance camera system.
So you're going to have a lot of residents wanting license plate readers on every street in front of their houses and everything. And so
Have you had that yet? Has anyone deployed that has notified you?
Here in town, like your block camera? No. No, they haven't. But as for your comment, from the system, everyone's going to want this or public safety cameras. Obviously, you can't do that. At training recently with some chiefs, working with some that have systems in their town, Piedmont being one of those, you have to be strategic and capture your access points and egress points because they can't be everywhere. And we're still working on, we haven't got much traction yet, but working on that private-public partnership, identifying those residences that are strategic locations that if they would add a camera to their system, again, at their cost, they'd have to retain the information, but as long as we knew who they were, much like a lot of the cameras that we're aware of in our system, we can then reach out and take a look at it.
well, I think it would be really important to be prepared to be able to explain to residents the benefits and the downside of having, I should say, the benefits of not having license plate readers on every street corner, or just the basic reasons why that's impractical and not doable, but, other solutions that we can offer them, because they don't understand that it's not practical to have it on every street corner.
Right. And of course, there's the privacy and the negativity that goes with systems like that. And I'm imagining the support still is there for a system like that in light of there's a lot of support at the community meetings for that, a lot of discussion about it. And if that continues, and of course, based on your direction, we go, it's not cheap, it's very expensive.
For what it's worth, I'm somebody who's sensitive to the privacy side of it, and I'm very concerned with where that information goes, how it's stored, how it's accessed, who's got access to it. If it's going to a statewide database, it's, you know, a different thing, or at least raise a new issue.
And I forget the name of the community, the chief that I was at training with when she was mentioning they just installed the system that's along 101, similar size geographically. There's about $1 million plus to install. Well, not with that many cameras because they limit access, and there's about $60,000 a year in maintenance. So it's not cheap, and it all comes scalable in size. And you know what it would be for us, we're going to have to get some people to take a look at it and come before you in the fall and have a robust discussion about it.
We had that one resident talk to us about the privacy issues. So we do need to have a debate, a little bit more of a debate on that and the town input. Because there's, while a lot of the younger generation put all of their personal information out there.
Us old people.
Us old people, as you said, are more concerned about that. We've thought it through or whatever, but you know, I think that it's already been brought up by a resident. As you know, you were at that meeting, and we promised that before we did anything along those lines, we would have a
Yeah,
discussion.
education would be key, just so that they don't think it's a big brother system, and that there are a lot of controls in place and access to the information and how it's utilized and how it's released.
Can we get an update on the electronic citations? And if that system is going to be expanded and what we can expect to
It
see?
was supposed to have been, I don't know the particular reasons for the delay, but with any IT project, it seems like there are delays. It was supposed to be deployed around now or June. Now it's going to be August or September.
So I assume, just because we had that recent experience with cameras, that we're picking the right electronic.
We are picking the right electronic. So
We have to,
We know that for a year.
Or two.
and that will be a continuing challenge for all police chiefs in the country as technology continues to advance. You buy the one thing. What we're trying to do is make sure that it's interoperability and trying to avoid the replacement, but it's just going to happen faster and faster and faster.
it's just brutal for a community that goes out and buys 25 cameras. And, you know, if we bought 25 and then somebody said, oh, they're getting bought, the software's no good. It's just continual technology sucks.
We're small, there's tasers.
I'm trying to remember, is this the one where we're paying so much for memory? Is that the conversation? Is
Right,
it
there's a
different?
lot of storage fees really.
Yeah, and again, we had this conversation.
It's
but
much
clearly,
like-
the
much
storage
like-
fees costs are gonna be
Yeah,
going
it's much
down.
like cellular, they just want to get the device in your hand, the camera, and then they're.
Yeah, the
they'll sell
razor
the
thing.
storage.
Yeah.
You have that truth.
Yeah.
We want to be technology forward, but it seems like every time we move forward, we're taking 2 steps back by, flipping.
We could be slow enough, because I mean, my dad just moved from a flip phone to an iPhone.
There's nothing wrong with flip phones.
And is his life any worse for that?
Yeah.
Does he still talk to you?
Some days I feel like that could be better.
You don't have to have everything.
Still communicate.
There's face recognition.
All right.
all that stuff.
Thank you.
Good.
All right,
You know?
Thanks, Chief.
Thanks, Chief.
wonderful.
You know where to find me if you need more.
Can we take the guests in the
All right,
Yeah.
we're gonna move on to our,
Oh, you want me to stay for traffic?
that's fine, you can, yeah,
If you like it.
if you like it.
I said if you like it.
All right, so I think we have, dang it, doesn't want to stay. So traffic/circulation, we'll take construction separately.
Maybe,
Yeah.
I think.
So our next topic is traffic, circulation, the persistent challenges of,
Related to it.
yeah, of the hectic location of this town and the impacts on.
Well, I think one of the things we've already mentioned is obviously the traffic motorcycle program that's very effective. That's something that's got to be kept worldwide.
Well, the traffic impact and the cut through due to our neighbors' growth.
Right,
And then on top of that, so it's not only the neighbors' growth, but it's also the technology that they're using for the cut through capabilities. That's a big issue. And then, of course, we already mentioned, and we have it down, I don't know if it's gonna be another sub-bullet, but the construction. You know, we brought up a couple times, well, yeah, but there's also the road construction for the infrastructure improvements. It's leading to major impacts on our major north-south thoroughfares as well as, I assume there's also east-west, at least there have been over time, but then house construction similarly is slowing things down. Then, of course, the town moving in these big houses over here brought traffic to a standstill here on Watkins.
Oh my God.
6 a.m. though, wasn't it?
Come on. Mayor, excuse me, I
It's
really have
just
to
a
take.
joke,
you know,
Elizabeth.
I understand, I mean, there's
No,
lights.
let's deal with the cut-through traffic,
I
that's
actually
the
have,
real issue.
if I could, in the cut-through traffic, so I think we're heading this way, but at least my goal for us as a council would be to decide whether we want to try to manage traffic so that it's going, you know, away from what I'll call neighborhood streets and towards what I would call arterials or larger streets. And I don't think we've made that, right now we sort of don't have a policy of traffic's going where it's going. And I can see pros and cons of it, but I think we should, I'd like for us to be able to grab that with appropriate input and everything else and come to some decision about what we think is the right way to go as a town.
So that whole townwide traffic study comes back to you on July 17th. You have the full report, gathering some comments and feedback around it, and then bring that to that July 17th meeting. That's a key component to where we need to go next.
Yeah.
But it's the philosophy, do you want to deter traffic or
Oh, you
encourage
gotta
traffic
move
to
it
move
quickly.
quickly?
Yeah.
That's the,
Whoa, that report focuses on street lights
Yeah.
on northwest streets. What
Traffic
it
lights,
doesn't
yeah.
focus on is neighborhood traffic calming devices, which Atherton has never done anything about, and which residents constantly want to do something about, but the program that we instituted doesn't enable them to get involved. At least nobody has ever managed to move forward on a proposal for traffic calming devices.
Yeah, so it's either flow improvements or deterrence.
philosophy.
Well, they're not entirely in conflict, because one of the things, you think about like Middlefield, for example, well, they're a bad example, but you could do is push traffic into the larger streets and deter it from the neighborhood streets. So you're actually hopefully not hurting flow too bad, you know, on the larger streets, but you are deterring it from the neighborhood streets.
But to do that, you have to put in some kind of.
Right, you gotta actually do that, right? Humps or
Linda
Yeah,
Vista,
so
Monte
taverns or
Vista,
something. Yeah.
Linda Vista, Monte Vista are two cut-through streets that occur from the Alameda when they come down.
Yeah.
Fairview's another.
And that's a great sort of microcosm.
So I live in that neighborhood, and I don't see that. I think Tuscaloosa and Stockbridge are much more cut-through streets from Alameda than Linda Vista and Monte Vista, because to get to Linda Vista and Monte Vista, they have to cut through on Camino al Lago, which is a curvy street, and there is not very much traffic on
I
that
think it's
street.
people coming, I'm sorry.
No, we're good.
I think it's people coming, what I'll call southbound on Alameda, because you got that stop sign there, so then they turn left to avoid the traffic backup from that stop sign, and turn right on Fairview.
Southbound, no, but
Monte
you-
Vista and Linda Vista go this way, Stockbridge goes this way, so you're talking two different,
I'm aware of that.
okay,
Stockbridge and Tuscaloosa are parallel.
right.
And people, I think, cut down on Tuscaloosa, who are southbound, that's right, cut through on Tuscaloosa and Stockbridge in order to avoid the backup on Alameda
Right.
that occurs at Atherton Avenue and Alameda.
So
But they
we
don't
had-
come over to Linda Vista and Monte
We had
Vista.
the Fairview, I don't want to say, we had a number of residents of Fairview come to what the council, was it council?
It's
Transportation.
Transportation committee meeting, and that's what they said, is that's what their biggest gripe was, people coming down, turning to avoid the stop, to avoid the traffic, the stop sign on Alameda, turning at Fairview.
And I remember
I
that.
can clarify that.
Go ahead.
a bit. So,
We need a map.
what Councilmember Lundquist is talking about is, let's say, afternoon traffic going southbound on Alameda from Menlo Park.
Right. Southbound on Alameda from Menlo Park?
From Menlo Park, from,
That'd be north.
Woodside.
sorry, north.
Southbound on Alameda is in Menlo.
Sorry,
Woodside Road.
northbound.
Woodside
My
Road or
mistake.
something.
Northbound,
Okay.
in the afternoon.
Okay.
From Menlo Park, that back up at the stop sign at Alameda and Atherton Avenue.
Correct.
To avoid that, as they're coming northbound, they're taking a right on Camino Al Lago,
Okay.
and then turning left on Fairview,
Yeah.
going to Atherton Avenue, where the queue for the stop sign is a lot shorter. So they're waiting
Yeah.
less,
Oh, sorry.
driving around that traffic to continue southbound on Alameda. So they're just basically looping around
Yeah,
and
that's
back up.
possible.
It's like a roundabout.
They go around the school.
In the morning, they go around each other.
In the morning,
It's the
it's
other
the other
way.
way.
It's the other way, they come down Polimus or come down
Yeah.
any other.
I do
Stockbridge,
that.
they go the other way.
Does your traffic, is the
Elizabeth does that.
traffic study looking at all these things too?
They looked at the signals, but we didn't commission the study originally to do traffic.
And do you know, is Waze pushing people on those neighborhood streets to do that?
Yes. And that
I
would,
thought at one point we talked about going to Waze and having them
Yes,
modified,
we did.
because I know
I
that
remember
Colorado
that
has done that. Los Altos
but
has
Robert,
done
you gotta
that.
put up a sign.
Robert's new. That was Mike. Sorry,
Robert,
Robert
you
didn't
gotta
get
put up a
this.
sign.
I think Rick's right, wasn't the issue you have to put a sign or something up that
Yes.
says no left turn, no right
No
turn?
through
or
traffic
something?
sign, but no through traffic signs are not enforceable. And if the Waze
Waze will
folks,
comply.
pardon?
The Waze will comply, will not.
Waze will put it on their
Right.
algorithm, in their algorithms, but
Yeah.
if enough folks continue to go that way anyway,
Yeah, we found that
it
out
will,
on Marsh Road.
it'll point you in that direction.
So you're saying, I'm sorry, just for a point of clarity, because we have a few of these no left turn. If we have signs that say no left turn on certain
That's
hours.
enforceable.
No, no left turn.
Okay.
No through, like on Oak
Well,
Grove
Local
at,
traffic only.
Local trip.
Right.
So,
Is that easy?
like at Oak Grove at Menlo,
Yes.
Atherton High School, you know, it says no through traffic,
Right.
I
right?
mean, I think that
But he's
that's.
saying that's not enforceable.
I know, but it does deter a lot of people.
So but the thing
And-
is, as
and
soon
Waze
as one
will
person
change
does
it.
that, but as soon as one person does it, we found out on Marsh Road, as soon as one guy drove through with his Waze on, then it assumed the
Then
road
they
was
all go.
open, and then suddenly it was routing people through
Because
it.
the
Is
traffic
that
officer
under
can only stop one car at a time.
Yeah, when we were doing a channel.
So one option, so right, so a different option, if that's a problem, and I can see that it could be, would be to put a no right turn between 4 and 5, or 4 and 6, or whatever.
3 and 6.
Between some period of
Or maybe
time.
school issues at Camino Al Lago or other
But
intersections.
isn't, I mean, the basic issue is, do we, right now, we have a philosophical issue about do we want to do anything? We've never done anything.
So
Somebody back in time did.
the additional deterrent is to add stop signs.
Or no left turns left.
Because that, not necessarily, so all the other jurisdictions going, we're just gonna use Alameda as an example. If you go all the way up to Redwood City, and they've all had our problem, because they all used to look like us with one stop sign. They all said, you know, we don't like this flow, so to change people's driving habits, we put all these stop signs to keep them.
Alameda and Redwood City put a half a dozen stop signs.
So did Belmont. Belmont was all the way to 92, frankly. So everybody has kind of gone to this philosophy of, we were gonna deter you, keep you on the 85s and El Caminos instead of deterring, or getting you to go through jurisdictions. We're gonna make it longer for you because they don't, for example, if you put a stop sign at Stockbridge and Alameda, the traffic most likely would, logic is, go left to try to get around it, but they're not gonna make a left turn prior to that because they can't make it through Redwood City unincorporated. So therefore, even the apps won't even put you through because it's a maze of mazes. So you literally stop more traffic than it deters them to stay on Woodside Road or just to stay straight on Alameda because it's actually faster to continue to go through Atherton as a philosophy.
There is a stop sign at Stockbridge and Alameda.
No,
They're
they're
on Alameda, on Stockbridge.
On
Stockbridge,
Stockbridge.
not on Alameda.
east to west, not north to south.
Well, I think we should.
No, but he's saying you could put a stop, right now, the traffic study that we're gonna get calls for a street light
Yeah.
at Stockbridge and
It's a very
Alameda.
dangerous intersection.
But there's several locations where we've had a lot of accidents. And many of the accidents are people turning left. And so I think that kind of coupling a no left turn, but with certain time periods during the heavy time would move people down to the safer turns where the lights are. And so I think that that's an option that we should look at, and
So
that would
then
also
they
serve
would
as a
go
deterrent.
up Marymount to Polohemus.
No, well, you have to do the same thing with Polohemus. You have to put a no, if you're gonna put it, if to deter the southbound traffic in the morning from cutting through on Stockbridge and Polohemus, whether you put another stop sign at Stockbridge or not, which I agree with Elizabeth, it would be safer if we did that. But I think you'd have to put a no left turn during those hours on both Stockbridge and Polohemus.
And if we would do that on some of those roads coming onto El Camino, and also some of the roads on Middlefield where we're having these accidents, let's just look at where we're having these accidents.
I think
That's what's the key
statistically-
area where we might be able to do something.
One of the things the study showed, there are two things that really surprised me. One is that we're doing something wrong, I believe, in the study, because it's showing traffic is not increasing over time, which just doesn't make sense.
Because she says because it was already at capacity.
That's right.
It's still hard to imagine it as an increase. It seems so weird. The other thing is, there aren't that many accidents.
Yeah.
There just aren't. When you look at the stats, there just aren't many accidents.
So as a commuter, the things that deter me are speed humps and stop signs.
Yes.
Unless, if I've got a no left turn between the hours of 7 and 9 or whatever, unless I see one of them, I'm gonna make a
I'm gonna do
turn.
it.
No way.
You wouldn't.
George.
Keep an eye on this guy.
You got a reporter in here.
But that's also our challenge, because if we put somebody, these signs out here, don't turn between 7 and 9, or whatever those hours are, if they're the peak traffic commute times, are motorcycle officers or where?
Schools.
Schools,
Yeah.
but not at these intersections. And you're not gonna be able
We
to-
can't be at all.
But I think that Mike's actually got the right answer. We have to answer the question of, one, are we want to be a community as a deterrent through traffic, or do we want to promote traffic through the town? And that's a philosophy issue. Drilling down the locations is a lot more of a conversation than we're going to be doing
I
today.
agree with that. One of the other things I mentioned is, don't forget, if we put up no left or no whatever, residents are affected too.
Absolutely.
You know,
And there's where community
But-
outreach.
On those streets, those cut-through streets, residents aren't using that. I mean, Elizabeth might, but most residents aren't
Elizabeth
using
and
that.
George.
You mean people who live on Polohemus don't use their
No,
street?
people who live on Polohemus aren't driving between 7 and 9 AM where they need to turn left, because they know that traffic on Alameda is
Because
horrendous.
they don't have to go to
We
work? What?
ran into this
So
challenge.
they don't have to turn left.
We ran into that very challenge on Watkins, because there is a no right turn between certain hours and no left turn.
In the afternoon. You can't go left turn on
Wait,
Alameda.
ECR or Middlefield?
Middlefield.
Yeah.
And the majority of the tickets that were
Yeah.
issued were to residents.
Yes. We have it on Asheville too.
Make some extra money.
That's a different.
It's a different intersection, agreed, but it does affect residents.
That intersection, if you're going to 101 and you live on Watkins or Burns, so you're in that neighborhood that feeds that stop sign, you have to turn left in the morning, or you have to go down Station Lane to,
It's the one street over, whatever was that cut-through street. That
Walnut?
goes down Watkins, it was one street.
Walnut?
No, it's.
Oh, Holbrook Lane?
No.
Holbrook Lane, yes, it was Holbrook. Holbrook's the one.
Yeah,
that has the-
Oh, yeah.
well,
Yeah.
I can understand why that was the case.
Yes.
Those people living on Holbrook Lane.
So I think
Always
that,
been a
that, I think
thought.
that really is, myself personally thinking, that's where our real discussion has to be. Location of what we do is a whole different story, but if we want to move people through faster, I just think it's just gonna get worse the way growth is north and south of us. So I don't think personally making it easy is.
I also think we should be thoughtful about that, because the net effect of it would be to funnel people onto the arterial street. So if you lived on Fair Oaks, it's gonna be the busier street if we funnel people on it than if we don't. And, you know, that's just something to be aware of.
And I think we have to work harder with trying to solve our issues with Waze and other apps, because everybody's driving with apps today. So, you know, most people aren't carrying a map with them, so making a left, if one car makes a left, it's like water. Everybody trickles that way, assuming that person must have Waze, they know a way around it. we've got to figure out how to work better with waste. Palo Alto does it, why can't we do it? So,
All
Oh,
right.
Alto and Menlo Park do it.
yeah.
They're much more traffic management devices in both of those towns. We don't have any.
And as you know, if you go up through Stanford, the chicanes that Stanford just finished going
Oh.
through, that has changed driving 140.
Changed
On the
Bicycle.
hill, the hills.
Yeah, so that's slowing traffic down because the speeds were getting great, but it's also making it more manageable, but it's also a deterrent.
Physical impediments are
Yeah.
are the gain of
Let's
commuters.
put them all.
Out-
No, that's
The
right.
fire department will really
Stop
love
signs, I
that.
agree with you.
That's okay, we love the fire department.
Have we made any decisions?
We're not making decisions.
Well, I think
Decisions,
I think we're
but
saying
philosophy
to
conversation.
deterrent. maybe.
Philosophy, if we're saying philosophy, I'm a deterrer.
I'm a deterred.
I'm a deterrer.
Yeah, so what I was hearing was, it takes looking at both. You're gonna do the traffic study, look at the flow part, but the other side is to identify and explore what those options are. So stop signs, no turn lanes, speed humps, and look at the viability of those alternatives.
And I think we have to work close with our emergency responders for primary response routes, which includes obviously the fire district, because we want to do the right thing and put the appropriate, or consider the
Yes,
appropriate.
exactly. Well, they said they would agree to humps. if there was
I'm
the
not
right
sure
type of-
about that.
Like
Everybody else has done it, we
Orange.
haven't done it.
Right.
I know, but we can do
So
so.
people cut through our neighborhoods, and they don't cut through the other neighborhoods.
They've agreed to, the fire district has agreed to the humps if they have those wide wheelbase.
Like on Orange Avenue.
Yeah, like on
Um,
Orange, like they've done, like Menlo Park is now starting to modify some of theirs.
Think of how many people cut through North Groves. Not too many.
But it's not,
Because
North Groves isn't a
because
cut
it's a
through.
pain in the, and the county is not changing that, because they've said those residents there do not want to promote through traffic through North Groves.
You don't want
I
to
do that.
promote traffic.
Somebody does,
Stress
for the record.
I don't want to,
All right.
build a wall around.
What about construction? That's a whole other arm of this.
Oh, yes, construction.
Before we, I can take a second, Tom, I was not sure, what are the next steps in this process? 'Cause
So I believe you have a copy of the full studies that were done. Have you got those yet?
Ah, we do.
You do. So the feedback is coming up at the
Great.
July meeting from the council back to staff with respect to the philosophy issue. And then we're gonna take those studies and try and come back to have a more deeper conversation of where to put some of those deterrents, if that's the direction you want to go. But we wanna have a community meeting around that issue as well. You didn't wanna have a full-blown community
Right.
meeting, just wanted a regular council meeting that we promote.
Yep,
Yeah.
So that'll be July.
July.
I think there'll be a lot of community interest if they know what we're discussing.
And that would be after the summer.
Yeah, I
Oh,
think we should,
right.
it's really important to get community input because they will be,
Yeah,
Yeah, if we want community input, we should be doing it when our residents are around.
and we need maps.
yeah.
We need
So
visual
we're going to study
aids.
back in
Everybody
July
else does it
for
during
the
the summer.
for the conceptual clarity, and then we'll have a scheduled community meeting, council meeting,
Yeah.
bigger input, notice,
Yeah.
sometime after the summer,
Mhm.
when we have the maps and all that. conversation.
I have to tell you, I was at a meeting and one of our local elected officials from Palo Alto, you know, had heard that we were talking about traffic. She said, "You don't have traffic? What are you talking about? What's Atherton, what kind of traffic do you have?" You know, and she was, Palo Alto has traffic.
She only comes here on weekends.
Always takes the trains.
I will say that Monday was unbelievable.
Wonderful.
Yeah, there's nobody on the streets.
Yeah, I can actually walk the dog.
And when the schools aren't in session, it's pretty nice around there.
Okay, Nancy.
All right,
Oh,
Bye,
thank you.
Chief.
Construction's here,
Thank you.
Chief.
right.
But your
Just keep
construction
the
related.
traffic going. You know, I want to talk about speeding. I gotta tell you, speeding, I don't think
That'll
our,
be reasons next time.
such a
Yes.
great job.
We'll work on that.
Yeah. Well, they used to have them in the-
Speeding,
Speeding, oh, we forgot to mention speeding.
oh my goodness.
Speeding, everywhere.
Speeding,
Speeding, we need to
Down
get approval
park.
for those
Down.
cameras that they have.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
On the UK.
I don't think they're legal.
No, they're not legal. But we need
But
to
you want one?
advocate. Let's
Yeah,
get
I'd
that.
like one.
Speed cameras.
Speed cameras?
Speed cameras, they're.
So I mean, how fast do people read? Every time
They're
the
legal in Europe.
chief comes in and talks, he says, we were out there for 2 hours and we didn't see.
I don't believe that. I
Yeah.
cannot imagine that.
When you put a
because they
police
go-
car, people are gonna go slower. You put a radar trailer, they might not see it in time. And you
Yeah.
collect some statistics.
How is it?
And it's, they're not going as fast as the bystander perceives.
And I think
They're going 40, 50 miles an hour.
I think there's
Yes.
also a perception of
Absolutely.
what people are doing.
Alejandro?
On Alejandro, on Emily, on Park,
On all the streets.
all the streets.
But I would
Our
say-
lanes.
I would question that. I
That's
really
not
would.
true.
I think El Camino, people can drive really quick. There's only a few streets you can really get
You
going.
don't drive 40 or 50 miles an hour on Atherton
We should talk
Avenue.
to the
You don't
motorcycle
drive 50 miles an hour.
On Park.
Talk to the
on
motorcycle
Emily.
cops.
Have you ever had someone go 50 miles an hour on
70.
Atherton Avenue?
Rare.
50?
Rare. Well, it's
The
been,
TJ
it's been,
got the guy on my street,
And-
70.
Yeah.
Wow, that's just,
And it's a short street, as you know.
so George has
It's
got,
this-
when you mentioned, I apologize, but you said it's gotten better since we started doing the enforcement because of the problems that we've had on El Camino Real. The active enforcement has reduced the speeds in Atherton once you hit our city limits because people know that there's a large percentage of time that somebody's sitting out there running radar.
On the ECR.
No jurisdiction runs radar, no jurisdiction really runs radar on El Camino Real. We do, because of the problems we
The
have.
Hawk Beacon slow people down. a little
Yes,
too. It's like, oh,
once those
we might
get
just
triggered.
stop there.
Yeah.
I think they should go.
So
on
we have
for-
actually caused that speed to
10
go down
minutes.
because of the enforcement.
All right, go team. All right, we're talking about construction,
I mean,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
love
you're right.
construction.
right?
I think construction is
The lifeblood of Atherton.
very, very good for our bottom line.
I think construction parking is a huge issue for residents, so.
Okay, let's identify the issues, so parking.
I think we should limit the number of construction sites that are allowed on any one street.
Clustered.
I don't think you can do that,
What do you mean
because
it's not
that
legal?
You can get a building
impedes
permit, we
an
can
owner's
use a permit, we can-
economic viability.
But then-
That's okay, we're gonna
Can't we
brainstorm the
stop?
issues, and then we can talk about what we can do about
Can't we limit the
that.
number of building permits?
No,
No.
Yeah.
It's
no.
not legal to limit the number of
Well,
building
you have to make
permits.
certain findings in order to do so, like Lake Tahoe. We can't make those findings, especially since there's a lot of parking available on
They
public
even
streets.
back
It's
down
not just
the
park, I'm not talking about the parking.
So,
It-
No.
There's
I don't
very
think it's,
specific resource
personally, I don't think
findings.
it's principally the parking, I think it's principally the movement of cars and trucks.
mayor.
I think there's a safety issue.
Yeah.
It's a finite amount of time.
I agree, it's probably, you probably can't do it, but I can also completely agree with Rick. We got that message from the gentleman who had
Yeah.
active construction sites on all 4 properties around him. That just seems excessive. I mean, you bought a house to enjoy and now you've got, I understand, but that's a problem. So I'd love to discuss anything we can do about that problem. Because I think that's not, that's excessive.
There's some, so that just doesn't make any sense at all.
Well, I agree with you, I've been in the same spot, but we do regulate, like no other jurisdiction, the timing, the decibel levels, noise,
Time of day.
And the park.
time of day, the parking. I mean, there's a lot of little things that we do that no other jurisdiction does.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, it's tough because
But
people,
the things you do to make it more palatable,
Sure.
also make it longer. Yeah, so, I mean, I'm not sure what the best
It
answer
would
is to
make
that,
it
but
longer.
you know,
Depends on what you say.
yeah.
yeah, but I don't think that there's a guarantee, even if we gave it a shorter time frame, a longer window, that they would actually get done quicker, because they're playing seasons as well. So,
You know, we had this issue come up when the construction boom began back in 2005, 2006, right? Big issue. The
Very
whole
well attended.
town went, what in the world's going on? You know, it was all along Park and Santiago and places like that. People, I mean, there was every house going down. And then there was kind of a little bit, well, we had a little downturn in 11, but it's just,
it's the size of sites.
Well, we've identified some things we can do that we're gonna do. For example, I thought we were talking about increasing the pardon?
Construction time limit.
Yeah, well, and the penalty for exceeding your construction time limit is kind of what you can do, get people to focus a little more to get it done
So they
on
don't switch all
time.
the time, is that?
That's I think that's a specific thing we can do that helps.
And the impact to streets.
so, you know, no construction on weekends, right?
Right.
Okay.
That's
And-
already there.
Right, but some people say if you could do, say, interior, no noise kind of stuff, like maybe painting, you know, of the interior on weekends.
But I
would
think
that be-
I think the problem with that is, once the door's open,
Yeah,
It keeps going.
then all of a sudden, you got 40 construction sites that somebody sneaks in.
yeah,
So when we have these sites that are shut off on weekends,
Yeah.
it gives the neighbors the guarantee that there's no construction,
Yeah.
and at least have peace and quiet
so you
Saturday.
can
and
walk
Sunday.
down the street
Right.
without construction cars blocking it off.
Are there, does anybody have any ideas about things that other cities have done that, we can't be the only city that's had to deal with this issue?
No, in fact, I come from a community that has very similar rules to that.
Belvedere,
Belvedere. And part of it is they have very, very narrow streets.
yeah.
Sure do.
Yeah.
Narrow streets.
Yeah.
So the parking is an issue. So they require contractors to park off-site
Yeah.
somewhere. 8 to 5,
Yeah.
Monday through Friday only, huge CTL penalty.
Yeah.
And that's about all they got.
Off-site locations and,
Yeah.
Our off-site parking locations are.
we can make them park in the park.
More minimal.
Or Redwood City, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's no off-site in Belvedere either, so the contractors figure it out.
Wait, so it's a state law that you can't limit how many
Right.
building permits are issued on, in a 5-house area?
No. But it is a law that limits permits on this area unless they're land use oriented or they have special.
But if you found that having more than 5 construction sites on one lot was detrimental to the health of the people who live there,
Our streets are not Belvedere streets, and we could make this one.
Out of curiosity, Lisa,
Narrow.
what would, as Rick's question, the criteria be for limitation? You said Tahoe, how did they get the limitations?
Well,
on Tahoe?
it's because it's such a sensitive need community, and they have the water quality issue. Tahoe wasn't as blue. And so they actually were able to pass those regulations where they, and I think there's also some water capacity issues, but there's specific findings that you need to be making in order to limit building.
They also have a
permits.
separate
Water
regional
capacity
planning
is a
agency.
typical one.
Gotcha.
Yeah, there's a separate planning agency. The city attorney's office could answer that.
And so it's physical to the actual number of homes, not the impact of the construction project.
Gotcha. You know, I don't know if the answer is, I get where you're going, and I get it, because these are huge construction sites. And I can see this with the Civic Center coming into play, we're gonna have more cars that are gonna trickle in. And I think the code enforcement component is gonna be a very big component, and I also think, personal opinion is that our police officers should also be doing some degree of enforcement to assist, because I think we're gonna get overloaded with one person.
Well, on the weekends, you know, I've mentioned to George before, on the weekends when they're driving by a construction site, and there's 50 cars in front of a site, I would think you could think that they might stop
That's it.
and say,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, what is the expense with hiring an additional code enforcement person? Is there a way to do it for off hours?
They should be paid for by what they bring in.
That's what I'm wondering, whether it's, whether they fund themselves essentially, or no?
I don't know they would fund it itself per se, but it would, it'd be a cost. You could do a part-time person, we could do a contract assist, or CSG like we did before, if we wanted to.
So they get pulled into building fees or something?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where they would be funded from, but certainly doable. I'm not sure that the actual amount of weekend work warrants it, but we could do that evaluation and bring that back for.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
think
the
it's
question,
not-
how much weekend work do you see?
I don't think it's just weekend work, I think it's load during the week. I think our residents in general with a construction site will complain Monday through Friday, just because when you're getting a site that there's so much, like, for example, parking issues, there's only so much Monica can do during the day. So therefore, if you have another person out there actually doing enforcement, having the conversation, maybe that deterrent that helps the neighbor, you know, basically say, you're doing a great job, she's always here, he's always here, you know, and I'm not gonna complain to George about the construction or to Rick.
Well, maybe they could start the secondary person, have a different modified shift. One could have some some weekend activity, but the other one, you know, maybe start at 6:30 or 7, which is when we get a lot of complaints that a truck came and dropped stuff off, and made a ton of noise, or they started work early.
You know, middle of the night, they bring in this big heavy equipment and park it on the right-of-way and download it into the right-of-way and then, you know, drive off.
Yeah.
And that should be illegal.
It is,
I think,
But,
unless they've got a specific equipment permit that allows them to do it.
well,
So,
I mean,
I
so
think
at
true.
2 o'clock in the morning, I'm gonna go out there and I say, let me see your
Yeah,
permit.
no, that one.
So if we,
I would suggest we add an actual body at this point. I would suggest a flexible contract
But
scenario.
if we just said that this is something that's of interest to us and to you, to come up with
Yeah.
a proposal.
Yeah.
But if
I think that would
if
help
we did add a body,
our problem.
wouldn't we be able to put that into the building permit cost? Because that's what this person would specifically be doing, is focusing on the construction.
Yeah, it would come out of the general fund, and building fees, and we'd add that cost to it.
Yeah.
It's,
No, but his point is it'd be a 218 addition to our current building fees.
yeah, well, it would be a 218 edition, we just adjust the fee.
Yeah.
So
Just-
yeah,
Right,
to
right.
cover, yeah. I just think that to be ahead of something, and we've had
It's a good
enough
idea.
complaints about it.
But,
We should
but,
do something.
I would say that it is the most common comment made to me,
Yeah.
is, I don't want to be that neighbor, I don't want to complain to the city, but since I see you anyway, I'm just going to tell you that this happened.
so this is all related to off hours?
It's almost always off hours.
Yeah.
yeah,
Or weekend.
Right, so I hear more than off hours, I hear how difficult it is to walk and how unsafe
Yeah.
people feel it is because these large trucks are constantly around them.
Right, no, I heard
Yeah,
that.
we-
I'm just wondering, the code enforcement extra capacity that wouldn't be able to address that so much as the off hours.
Well,
right?
they look at parking, and right now, you know, somebody, if there's a truck right at the edge of your driveway and you're on somewhat of a busy street, or there's traffic time, you can't see around until you're all the way out and somebody's running you off the road.
Most of our contractors, when you go to the
Yeah.
building round table meeting, they know what our parking requirement rules are, and they've got a pretty strict, and there are some subcontractors that'll come on site and park in other people's places, but they actually require neighbors to sign off to allow people to park in front of their house. So some projects where you see them inundate their front yard and the front yard of another property owner, they've got permission to do that. So that's not an actual violation when you see some of those. There are some that.
There are subs that don't know what's going on. I know there are subs that don't know
For
what's
sure.
going on.
Yeah, I think there's a learning curve with the contractors. The ones that we have that are here all the time know our system and know our officials, and they comply with the rules. There's the ones that come in and they're building a spec home or blah, blah, blah. They don't know, they've been building in Los Altos, built this home, and then we have a year of problems trying to figure out what we can do and what we can't do. And I think that that's where the other body would come into play to educate those people, because it's consistency, because you may have 50 subs, on
Yeah.
the site. So you're literally talking to 50 people saying, no, you can't do this. No, you can't park in the middle of the road.
Can I ask Lisa a question about a current project, which I think in a road, did we, is that, pardon me?
Oh, go ahead.
The road, the hairpin curve on Britain, didn't we do a lot line adjustment on that? So is that road, hairpin curve going to,
They're conditioned to widen it.
Yeah.
they've got to widen it, so, yeah,
To meet current fire standards, right?
right.
And radius.
Yeah.
Just the curve, is it, because it's gonna encroach on their little triangle.
Ladder
Yeah,
truck.
so they're required to make it, I think, 20 feet wide.
Ladder truck.
Okay, that'll be nice, that will be nice. But then coming up Britain that merges into Alexander, it really is a one-lane road. It really is a one-way lane road, right?
It is. Chop down those trees, huh?
Oh, I was going to chop down. No, I don't mind that, I just want, people to
So-
understand, or maybe we'll put some
Lisa
signage
had a
up
great
there.
comment.
Hook and ladder down there.
She always has.
That the
great-
trees are great traffic calming measures.
Yes,
They are.
That narrow road.
Yeah.
All right, let's
So are the
start.
potholes.
When are you gonna plant a tree in the middle of the road,
It's the opposite.
Because I
Sinkholes are
never
great.
saw it all.
Oh, yeah, we should put one on every street.
Right in the middle, right in the middle, right around. All right, so you'll be looking at the kind of the benefits, cost benefit of adding the part-time, probably code enforcement, some capacity anyway, via contract that can help with some off-hour enforcement, parking violation type things outside of what the police would do, and then provide some education, potentially.
And Rebecca, recommendation for that. I'm reluctant to add a pensionable body or.
Yeah, this, yeah, look at a contract license position, to test it out anyway, yeah. Okay.
Good.
Anything else on construction?
We love it.
Slow it down.
Slow down, I don't know. I don't know.
Well, eventually the market will slow it down.
Yeah,
True,
Sadly.
true.
Sadly.
And then it'll be a whole other set of problems.
Yeah.
Yeah.
New goals.
All right, so are there any topics that, or priorities that we didn't cover today? That we ought to, we exhausted our list of items. Okay, so to kind of wrap, all of this is all gonna come back to you in the form of a report that gets incorporated into kind of this ongoing work plan item. So that'll be a kind of deliverable out of this. But it would probably be helpful to George and those that remain before they run away, if you just, not thinking that you're taking things off the list, but just to kind of quick around the table, if you had to pick two things that for the next 2 years were your top priority, what do you want to focus on, what would they be?
Top priority out of this list that we've just gone over?
Just generally, I mean, we covered some things that are sort of ongoing items, that could be a part of that as well, we talked a lot about a lot of things today, so. And again, this doesn't mean that other things are just like coming off, but just in terms of magnitude.
For the 2 years? Can we
Yeah,
go-
for the next
go
2 years.
3? Retention of staff.
Okay, but we would talk about this, right?
See?
Talk about that.
Hey.
Instead of what we talked about.
Well, I'd say that's the Civic Center discussion.
We hope they're all in a state, the entire project, and
You want to get these shorts because this paper's down. Okay, thank you. Okay, staff retention, civic center.
and my second one would be the resolve the fire district issue.
Yeah.
Get a resolve on that someday. 5 years.
Well, yes,
So why don't you say your two? You don't need to respond to his.
Right, these are, yeah, this
It's
is.
not it's not a debate.
Everybody gets two.
Just opinion, everybody gets two.
That's right, it's just for ourselves, right? It's not necessarily for the whole council.
Yeah,
I need to think about it a little.
that's fair. Right,
It's the civic center and the traffic issues.
yeah, okay.
I think the Civic Center is our biggest priority right now, and I think managing the process is really critical. Change orders, we don't want change orders, I mean, we've already, neighbors are gonna, continue to, talk about traffic and this and that, and wanting us to modify what we've done, or what we've got planned, or everything. We've already had that happen already, and I don't want the creep of change orders to accommodate, squeaky wheels. Civic Center, I don't know when we have to really make a decision about the train station, but that is an important part of our, and then I think water treatment is, I guess I will.
That was 3.
Sorry. Well, I think water treatment is over the train station.
Okay,
Get
she
it out of
just
there.
gave a plug to the drainage water.
Yeah.
Shout out.
Okay, shut up. All right, who wants to go next?
Water treatment ahead of the train station?
Yes, so, yeah,
Train station.
number 2.
Did you-
Civic center and water,
I wasn't listening. I got distracted. When I'm
How
all
long have you
over
guys
here.
been married? I forgot.
I'm embarrassed now.
I would
So it's all
say
on tape too.
public safety and traffic.
Public safety and traffic, good.
supposed to do 3?
Two. Nice try.
4? Okay, so we already said that the Civic Center. I had for 3, I had Civic Center, public safety and traffic, but they're all taken now, so now I have to come up with
It's a number of votes.
No,
It's a number of votes.
Right, it's just for you, it doesn't, exactly, it doesn't,
Well, traffic, we got the Civic Center well under control, so I'm gonna say public safety and traffic are issues we need to spend more time on.
because the wheels are in motion on the other one here, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right, good, all right, that's helpful.
Civic Center and fundraising.
Where's the sixth council person?
She's not
Little voice
listening.
down here.
See, you even got staff to leave. Well, thanks, Elizabeth.
Wait,
We
was
pay
that?
them and they just let up the whole Like, okay.
What was your number 1, Terry, retention staff?
Just attention. Yeah, just fire.
Perhaps this is
Doesn't
good.
matter.
too.
Perhaps
there'd be
it doesn't
one.
outvote you.
We knew there'd be 1 vote for fire and 1 vote for water treatment.
Yes, figured those 2 were in. It's not that I wouldn't have said civic center, but I figured there would be 5 civic centers.
Right, yeah, well, that's.
That's
I
exactly
think
right.
everybody is on the
Yes.
same page with that.
And it was, that's kind of the way it is.
Okay.
All right,
All right.
it's your
Well,
meeting.
No, we've got more things to talk about.
Yeah,
Governing
governing.
together. Number 4.
We just did that.
I think
It wasn't just governing, you were just
did
demonstrating it.
That was just a,
Right.
an exercise.
If,
Got it.
if Nancy says we're done, then we can adjourn.
Oh, boy, that's the pressure right there. Well, let's just do this, just kind of in the interest of kind of bringing it full circle. As I mentioned at the beginning, actually 2016 was when we kind of went through a discussion around roles and around we're governing together and norms, these sorts of things. And so from that, you guys identified a whole series of kind of council norms. And so we thought it might be a good time to just take a look back and try not to throw them all over the place.
5 years is a lot better, diesel.
What's that?
5 years is a lot better.
That's my,
Oh,
that's
no,
my.
we're losing our
Oh, no.
audience.
Now we've really lost everybody.
It wasn't something you said, though.
Something I said. All right.
All right.
It might have been.
So these are the, and I'll read them out. The council norms that we came up, this was coming off the conversation around roles, which was, we had 4. We had mayor, council, city manager, and then we also had committees, and the advisory committees rules. Okay, so the council norms you came up with are showing mutual respect, being trustworthy, assuming good intent, listening with respect, seeking clarification with staff and with colleagues, so making sure that you are clear on your understanding of whatever the topic might be. Focusing on the issue, not the person. Disagree agreeably. When debate is over and the vote has been taken, then we collectively move on. Focus on the now, kind of staying in the present, and then treating everyone equally. Those are a good set of norms that emerged through that conversation 3 years ago. So.
So
And how have we been doing?
should we discuss if we've achieved those?
Yeah.
We could do it, yeah, and that was one of the things we thought about doing was just kind of, which of these are you doing particularly well? And which of these are there areas that, there's always room for improvement in any kind of group setting. Because, communication and all this stuff is hard. So first of all, let's start off with, when you look at this list, what are the things like, we do a pretty good job on that. You can do a silent ballot if you want, but we can have just conversations.
I think in general, we do a pretty good job at most of those. We have our moments.
Some of us have
Okay, I'll also say, I think we're doing a better job today than we were when we beginning of 2016, 2015.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the one that jumps out at me is listen with respect.
Okay.
I think I wouldn't say unanimously, but I think we've consistently worked hard to listen to the other person, even when somebody disagrees with the other person, they disagree, I think pretty much we still have done that, and I think that's a really important one to do.
Yeah, you're never
I think it's
all agree on
helped make the
everything.
council
Aren't you?
cohesive that we've done that.
Is there agreement that you've done
Oh, yeah.
a good job on that?
I'm sorry, what was that? I wasn't listening.
Wasn't
Oh, do it. We now all have your hands.
Oh,
Listen, but you have been respectful. You're so
Well,
respectful.
perhaps he's been doing this, practicing this one and not this one.
Right.
No, as to whether or not, even among disagreement, which is natural and actually, healthy, right, for
Yeah.
any kind of governing body. Whether you're listening with respect.
CT.
Yeah.
Like the song.
RCCT, exactly. So is there, do you agree that this is something that you're,
Yeah.
I'm good with that. Yeah, I think so. I think we're also seeking clarification with staff and colleagues before, really jumping into the meat of it.
well, the conversation here, I think, was some evidence of that today, the exchange was really healthy.
One of the things I think that's hard, I think we're getting much better at it, I think it's hard, is that when debate is over and the vote is taken, move on. That's a hard thing to do. I think sometimes, just start doing always step or move.
Yeah, I think our votes have been pretty darn unanimous, even if we disagree with it, because we, listen to other people's views on it. Just a couple of times.
Well, and it's okay if it's not unanimous,
Yeah.
that's not a problem. It's just a matter, okay, well, collectively, we decided this, then we move on.
But I think her point is actually in debate, sometimes people change their position in order for it to be unanimous, because there's
Yeah.
value to that cohesiveness.
Yeah,
I see.
that's what
And I think that's a good observation.
Every once in a while, there's the dissenting person.
But I think Mike's right, it's hard to move on. That is the item that is the stopping point for many city councils.
Yeah.
And that makes their meetings go forever, because they just can't say, okay, somebody else said it for me, let's move on.
Yeah.
And we do, that's one to focus on, but I think we're probably better than most city councils.
Yes, since we're home earlier than most city councils.
Right, that is the
That is the way you judge it.
Well, I'm like Mike, I think we need to do a better job in that area. Recently, there have been some things that keep coming up that the council said, no, we're not gonna go do, and then they come up and, or we say we're gonna have subcommittees, and outside the subcommittee, people are working the issue. I don't have an issue with that, but, just on some things with the Civic Center that councils have decisions and votes, but they keep coming up. So anyway, we make a decision together, then we should make a decision, whether or not we're on the winning end or the losing end, and there's no winning or losing, but if you're on the majority or in the sub-majority level, then that was the decision. And if the situation changes and we bring new light or a new opportunity and we all agree to it, then I think that then we can all, in unison, change something.
Well, the use of your committees too, it sounds like an area where you can explore a little further if there is an unsettled, something. Okay, any other reaction to these norms, anything that's missing from this?
One of the things that's missing that I called out, that I thought we did a really good job on, was we created a subcommittee to deal with the station. I didn't worry about, it was created, it was the answer to my involvement. You guys reported back a few times, there was good progress. It's hard to, you have to trust your colleagues to let that happen. I thought that worked really well.
Yeah.
I think I've got going with a few, I just call that one out as one that was.
So thank you for calling that one out. That's a good one.
How about the fire?
Hey.
One did.
Yeah, that one was good too. That's another good group. I really like that one too. Thanks,
No,
Mike.
but that, I think, demonstrates trust, right? So the
Yeah.
ability to let go.
Yeah.
subjects.
And I will agree with Mike, that's it. You're doing a great job. That's a really good job. But I mean, that's kind of how I function as well. When it goes to a subcommittee, I know that you guys, whoever that subcommittee is gonna work diligently. I don't need to be involved in, because I want it to come back to us as a full discussion at some other later date. I may not know what's going on over there, and I don't want to change or confuse the process because I get involved in talking to somebody else, and then I say, oh, well, and then they go, well, wait a minute, we were talking to Bill and Mike on something, and that's not what they said. I want the message to be consistent, so it can be actually part of that transparency component that we work so hard on, to come back before all of us so that we can all, you know, hear what you guys have to say, or whoever it is, and that's it. Rick and I just do a very good job there.
Just overall.
Overall. Oh, and the rail too. Not that I'm gloating.
There's no common denominator there at all. Okay, well, so I mean, I think that having these is a good reminder to keep kind of in front of you and to take a fresh set of eyes. So maybe we can kind of wrap up this conversation. I had some other prompts, but I think that kind of knowing the energy in the room, but let's just think about this, and I'll write it up here too. So if you think collectively, you know, all the stuff's going on with town center and just, you know, lots of moving parts. What is something that you hope, you know, 5 years from today or 10 years from today, that this particular group of council members and mayor will be known for? This group. What do you hope to be known for when people look back?
Longevity.
Yeah, she's right. If in 5 years from today we're together, it will be the longest consistent group of council members in the history of the town.
And that's a very good point, because that's going to be exactly what I was going to say, because I think that as a council, we work very well together, but I also think that that is the image that as future councils interact and do what they do, that, you know, that we've had some issues in the past, and therefore, as kind of an example, what is the legacy of this council? And I think part of it is that we've done a good job at working together for the common interest of the town. And I think that that's how we should be in the future, as far as representation of.
Well, I just have to say, if it's for what we've been known for, there's no question. It's getting the Civic Center done.
Sure.
This is the biggest deal in the history of the town.
Yeah.
And we're the ones that made it happen.
Yeah.
And other people have tried, right? I mean, for a long time here. And that's what we're gonna be known.
But they didn't have George around.
Well, I think also, you know, there's not been controversy like is in past councils, and I think that that's what's caused divisiveness in the community, and I don't really see that there is that at this point in time. So I think that the council is working very, very well together, and we do have our differences, but we handle them properly, and as you also see, you know, as was brought up, our meetings aren't going until 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning as they were in the past, and as other communities still have them going. So, you know, every part of it is George as well, because in the past, you know, council meetings would start out with every consent item being pulled for discussion, okay? Now we're trying to get as many consent items.
Write down meeting.
Yeah, no, and George has done an excellent job at keeping us wrangled in.
What else? Anything else?
Well, I think that in addition to the town center, I think that where there's money available, I think that there's been consent on the council with regards to investment in the park. We've made investments in the park, and we've got others to invest in the park, and it's our only park.
The responsible public funds. I think we've been,
Oh, yeah, I mean,
you know, from the get-go.
Financially, fiscally responsible.
From my perspective, this has probably been the most collaborative and transparent council that I've seen.
That's very nice to say.
Well, that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And we all work hard, don't we? Don't you think we all work
Yeah,
hard?
no, absolutely, yeah.
We all do a lot
We all care.
outside the town, in the community, in the region.
Yeah.
Definitely.
filled up the page, so that's.
I guess that's enough.
Just got 3 more flip boards.
All right, that's it.
Oh, she wrote me like half a dozen of them. We got all night. Pulling from consent.
Oh my gosh, no.
Okay,
Okay, that's
that's
it.
good though. That's really good.
Motion to adjourn.
That's pretty good talking about ourselves for a while there, but, I mean, I think overall, yeah.
Well, the thing is that, it's helpful to kind of take a step back and looking at it at a macro level, what you're doing and how you're working together, because, there are gonna be little bumps along the way, there always are. I mean, that's just the nature of people interacting, but if you look at it from, kind of the balcony down, you can see how you're navigating all of these, difficult issues and working together, and by the way, accomplishing some big things, so, what?
I mean, honestly, that Civic Center is a huge step, and there was a lot to get there. Not meeting our goals and adjusting and doing what we had to do to get it done was a huge step on everybody's part. I mean, huge involvement from the residents that volunteered their time, ton of time. We worked through some pretty big speed bumps and a lot of outreach to the community.
Yeah.
Just to get it done. So it wasn't just us. I mean, we had residents that they gave up a ton of time, residents that followed us around at every community meeting. We were having a private residence. I mean, it was huge.
Yeah.
So, we
Master
did,
plan,
we
outreach.
did the decision making, but there was a lot of input from our residents.
I was gonna add one more to that list that says that we raise some additional money, since I think this is something that we've brought up a couple times.
Maybe
You
after
could-
now.
you could raise, well, I think that, it says what will be thought of in 4 or 5 years, 3 years from now, if we can be successful.
That's
Raising-
if we raise.
Yeah, well,
additional
that's
money.
our view.
What do you hope?
We hope to be,
What do you hope to be done?
I hope that we can raise the money that we think we want to, because I think it would just make everybody's life a lot easier. If we could be successful with doing what we thought that the community could put out, and make that happen, for whatever reason it didn't happen before.
So
it
I
would
think,
be-
yeah, go ahead, not to interrupt. I think a lot of residents, were holding back
Yeah.
and they didn't want to invest
Yeah.
because they didn't know that it was really going to happen,
Yeah.
because they'd gone down those roads before and, and now that the shovel's in the ground and things are going, and I think that's where you're getting, people saying,
That
well,
would be the cherry on top.
yeah, and a lot of residents weren't asked. They feel that
amazing.
they were not asked.
Yeah.
And when I went through and wrote that letter to every one of the donors on the list, I'm going, look at people who aren't on the list
Yeah.
that should have been on the
Yeah.
list.
Right. Well,
And even though it's publicly listed on the website,
Yeah.
everybody, I had not actually gone through every name, and, you go through your voter roll, and you go, well, why aren't these people, why? And I don't think they were really ever asked.
a key thing now is if we're gonna move forward and try and do this with the extra funding.
Yeah.
Okay? Making sure that every step of the way we have it, photographs of what the progress has been, not just in text, but
Which is in
or
line.
video.
Yeah.
I think that that's gonna be important to make sure people understand this is really happening.
And so if we could get some images, I'm brainstorming about the fundraising for all the bricks and the signage and, around for everybody. I just think we can do it.
Yeah.
I know we can do it, but we need images, we need some plans too.
I think we decided we first gotta find out what's happening with Atherton.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think that if we're gonna do it, we need to hire a professional to do it.
Yeah.
Somebody who, this is their business.
Well, I don't know that we have to hire them, but Atherton now tried, and they hired a professional,
Yeah.
quote unquote. Let's not talk about it anymore.
Right, I think we're pausing there,
Wait, there's
good
an
suggestion, we're putting it on, writing up, so.
Yeah.
Cherry.
The cherry?
Okay.
All right, so I will be taking all of this with me and putting it all together, so there's documentation of all of your conversation and the areas of focus, updating the work plan, if you will, getting that through George and bring it back to you. Anything else you wanna?
No, I think this is great. I enjoy these sessions once a year. It helps apply some focus, and big picture focus for staff and myself. And I think we can translate these into a work plan. It's gonna be very busy over the next couple of years. And staff have a lot of priorities on their docket. So we'll get to it.
Thank you, George, for all your work.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you
Sometimes
for-
I come and meet with you on Monday mornings and I see your head is going like this. You keep
Well, it was almost like that this morning. Let's see, PG&E's not gonna power up these buildings over here.
Is that right?
Atherton Fiber is dragging their feet on moving the fiber over here. The sinkhole on Maple. We got a bunch of other.
Yeah. Wow.
There was a
You ever see
sinkhole
that?
on
Yeah.
at the turning on from southbound El Camino turn lane onto Maple. There's a giant sinkhole.
Wow.
Which, I know, you look at this, but the friggin' the South Bay sewage folks or whatever, we're just operating like
Yeah.
30 yards away, and I'm
Yeah.
relatively
They didn't do
certain there's some
anything.
connection
Yes,
between
of course.
what's that
It's
and
not
that.
coincidental.
Yeah, you know,
So they've surveyed their lines.
yeah.
So you send something into their lines, no breakage.
Yeah.
Any of their lines.
Totally care.
Okay, but
Cal
it's
water
still
does the
just
same thing.
bizarre to me that that's just a coincidence, that right next to where they were working, we suddenly have a sinkhole.
Right where that tractor was parked?
Yeah, you know, that just seems really kind of weird, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Can you get out of Maple now?
It's in the middle of the road.
You go over the south.
Well, but the turn
There's a
lane.
metal plate over it?
Yeah.
No, they just owned it around it.
Oh, there's a, yeah, you should.
There's a travel lane closed with the left turn lane closed, go heading north, and ultimately around the turn lane. South.
Okay, so you can't turn left.
Heading south, I'm sorry, heading south. That's
Oh,
it.
I see.
Yeah, heading south, turn left in the middle.
Yeah. Don't worry, that's
Okay.
not, that's.
All right.
We're done?
Thank you.
Thank you
Call
all.
that?
Thank you. Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
So I wanna see it.
Like,
This
Right.
is
Right, maybe should I turn on
Like-
Watkins?
Like-
Right, past me.
yeah.
All right.
If you turn on Watkins,
guys.
turn right on Oak Hill,
All right.
you'll see it on your left as you go by.
Going on my left, I'm going north.
Yes. If you're having,
Oh, so it's on Maple, it's on the other side of the street from you.